Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is the fourth introduction to this particular episode. Something so egregious, and it sort of ties a lot of the stuff I'm going to present together, happened with a horrific video on MSNBC, a totally shill video. And so let me start here, and then I'll work my way back. I've already, like I said, done numerous introductions to when I originally made a voiceover from my last video, which was supposed to kick off this video. But there's been other things that have happened. Farmer advertising spending in the U.S. amounted to an average of $1 billion monthly by the end of 2022. That year, Dupixent took the lead at the top prescription drug ad spender. So the pharmaceutical industry, I mean, there's so many ads. I just showed an ad the other day. You see when you tune into Fox, MSNBC, and CNN. So the news is dominated by pharmaceutical ads. So this was an article here, advertiser spending on primetime news throughout the coronavirus pandemic. And it says here, overall, $2 billion were spent on ads during primetime cable news. And these are the networks here, right? And then you go through it. These are all the times that they use pharmaceutical companies as being the big spenders, right? It just, it's everywhere here. How much money they spend. And you'll know this if you turn into any of these type of cable news networks, right? That big pharma and pharmaceutical companies dominate the advertising budgets of these cable news networks. Not just them, but also regular programming, because they spend $1 billion a month, right? Okay, so in this video, I get into a few things. There's Trump comes out and on Truth Social and puts a video out about how he's clamping down on the whole gender thing, which is something that's positive from Trump, right? And I'll show you that. We start off. That was like the first or the second introduction to this video. And then as the day progressed yesterday, part of this was about Trump just bringing in his thugs and, incompetent and sometimes untrained, and certainly just people that were yes men for him that he's bringing in, and how some of that is really bad. A lot of it's really bad. And part of that, as that progressed, RFK Jr. was nominated as health secretary. And these guys had an all-out meltdown, right? And so we'll get to that all as we move through this video here. Towards the end, it was in progression, because when it started, there wasn't, Mark Rubio and whatever his name is, Rubio. And, he's such a shill for Israel, and his, statement, that's a viral video that's going around. And then all these other people, Gates and these other people that are like, just Trump shills that he put into his position. Of course, this is making cable news meltdown. But then this happened, right? And this guy, well, let's just watch this here.
Offer a little parable for our age, and I'm going to use sports for a minute here, so indulge me. I promise I'm going somewhere with it. So
I'm going to talk about sports, but I don't know anything about sports, and I don't ever talk about sports, and I'm obviously not an athlete. But I'm going to talk about this because there's a big point here.
This week on Sunday Night Football, Detroit Lions quarterback Jared Goff, generally a very good quarterback, was having a terrible game against the Houston Texans. Goff
Where is this going, bro?
4 interceptions by halftime, meaning he threw the ball, the other team caught it, taking possession. That's bad. It's a turnover. You don't want to do it. At halftime, someone posted a surprising statistic to social media, and it started going viral. Here it is. This is now Jared Goff's 7th career game with at least 4 interceptions. His record in those games, 6-0. Now, for those of you who don't follow football, that is an extremely shocking, improbable, indeed, it turns out, ridiculous claim.
How are you going to turn this into something relevant, bro?
4 interceptions a game is exceedingly rare. Winning 6 games where you did it? Okay. But it just kept circulating. The original poster even shared what appeared to be a graphic from a well-known sports statistic website to back it up that looks like StatMuse. And that was apparently enough for folks to just parrot the claim unchallenged. It went everywhere.
Oh, man, this is about disinformation. Good job, bro.
Even people who should know better, like ESPN host Pat McAfee and Aaron Rodgers, the conspiracy theorist quarterback for the New York Jets.
Conspiracy theorist quarterback from the New York Jets, who has a link to RFK Jr.
Jets, who RFK Jr. apparently wanted at one point as his running mate.
No way. It's just amazing that this sports story about disinformation is breaking when a guy who is going to be hard on your primary advertisers, which are Big Pharma, is nominated as health secretary. It's so weird that this happened all at once and then that you're covering it, and it just demonstrates the danger, the freaking danger of putting a crazy conspiracy theorist like RFK Jr., friend of Aaron Rodgers, a football player who shares disinformation on the internet.
I love Jared. I'm sure he'll bounce back. And the amazing stat, though, is this a true stat that he's done?
Is this a true stat? He's saying this. Is this a true stat? Because it was something shared because somebody, put together a fake graphic of a website that doesn't exist. I mean, that does exist. That wasn't a legitimate graphic of this legitimate website that would not put disinformation out. And so Pat McAfee thinks it's real.
4 more picks 7 times, and he's won every single one of those games. Is that real?
Yep, 7-0.
That's wild. I mean, that's why stats are for what Big Mike used to say, age?
Stats for losers.
They're for losers. Is this true? It's true. You can probably tell where I'm going with this.
Yeah, we can tell, Chris. You freaking. So I'm going to light into this guy. I'm just waiting for this thing to play out here, right? But you can see where I'm going with this, right? And so Aaron Rodgers said, because he just hammered Aaron Rodgers being crazy conspiracy theorist, is this true? And Pat McAfee confirmed it. Now, I saw Pat McAfee had a post, which I looked at, saying Aaron Rodgers was on and we put out disinformation. Because Aaron Rodgers' presence was everything. Because Aaron Rodgers, of course, he was asked if he was vaccinated. He said he was immunized. And he had taken a homeopathic remedy because he said he has a peanut allergy and he already had COVID. And he got slaughtered in the media, remember? So that was the whole thing. That he got slaughtered because, and of course now they're not covering the effects of what's happened. Like they're not covering any of the post-COVID stuff. Because they can't, because it would hurt their primary advertisers, which is Big Pharma, right? Big Pharma spends a shit ton of money on these guys, which we all know. And so I want to.
The statistic is not true. It was a total lie.
It was a total lie. Did you guys see this total lie? You can't win. You can't win 6 football games throwing 4 or more interceptions. You just can't do it.
Take it from the guy who made it up in the first place. Quoting, "If you've ever wondered how easy it is to spread fake information, I made this stat up while laying in my bed at halftime of the game."
Boom. The guy did it, right? Boom. He did it. He's posted this thing because he got him, right?
And this random Twitter football guy actually makes a pretty great point there. Now, thankfully, this is
a pretty good point. It's a pretty good point.
Totally harmless prank example.
It's harmless.
Disinformation. Doesn't matter. The only consequence was McAfee getting embarrassed and having to walk it back on air. But what happened in that exchange between Pat McAfee and do your own research, Aaron Rodgers, is kind of the entire story.
Boom.
Of our age, of our information environment. Right?
It is. It's the whole story. You guys, it's the whole story. It tells you everything you need to know. It's a whole story. When you get out, when you guys try to get your own information, you do your own research, you look at things at the internet. It's a whole story. You're getting bad information.
Now, those kinds of guys that are doing the vetting of what's true and not in our current information environment.
Those are the guys. Those are the guys, right? Those are the guys. Those guys do that. That's what the people don't watch me anymore. Those are guys that are telling you the truth, and they can't even figure out a fake statistic like this.
That's it.
That's it. They did it.
Those are the guardrails.
Those are the guardrails. Not me and networks like me that get paid by Big Pharma and get our information from the government and from the intelligence community and from the Democratic Party, and we just talk their talking points, and we put out like quality disinformation. But these guys, they put out disinformation like this, and it's crazy.
They are doing their own research, if you will.
They're doing their own research. Don't do your own research. Don't think for yourself. Just come back to us and listen to us to tell you what to think.
Across our political culture, I mean, everything, lies and misinformation and intentional slander about immigration and immigrants and the economy.
All those things that got Trump elected. See, this is what happens when you have disinformation just being spread by ordinary folks on the internet, and Trump gets elected, and RFK Jr. ends up being nominated for health secretary, and then my handlers and my controllers, who are big pharma, who pay my bills, come into me and say, "What the fuck you doing, bro? Go out there and find something to disparage the information flow on the internet by finding some silly little fact of disinformation that's there."
Spreading on this kind of terrain where the anti-vax quarterback just parrots an unvetted statistic he saw on Elon Musk's website to millions of people on ESPN.
Exactly. Elon Musk and anti-vax and Aaron Rodgers and Trump and RFK Jr., all these people. That's how it works.
The stat. Yeah, it's true. That's it. That's the whole problem in miniature.
That's the whole problem in miniature. It's the whole problem that, people who are professional disinformation agents like myself and my network no longer can do this exclusively. Ordinary folks are spreading bullshit on the internet just like we do, except when we do it, it's paid and it's evil, it's nefarious, because it's big companies that fuck you over with poisonous medications and shit, right?
A miniature version of the enormous problem that we all face that has gotten us to this point.
Gotten to this point where Trump's elected, and you guys don't know what the fuck you're doing because you got to leave spreading disinformation to the professionals.
Rest of us got to try to find some way to solve.
Right, find some ways to solve.
I will be the first to say we do our part here, but I don't know the answer.
We do our part here. We're trying to get rid of disinformation. We do it. We get ordered from Big Pharma and our handlers, and they tell us, don't let any of this truth out, and just make sure that you put out as much of this little petty disinformation shit as possible, right?
The answer, but boy, oh boy, are we going to have to come up with something.
We're going to have, boy, oh boy, we got to come up with something. Better start censoring these motherfuckers. You don't let ordinarily people talk on the internet and maybe get something wrong, like it's been happening for centuries when people used to have conversations and somebody would hear some bullshit. When I was a kid, I heard that, and a number of you have heard this, that bubble gum. So we had bazooka bubble gum, right? We had bazooka bubble gum was a big bubble gum. And there was a new bubble gum called Bubble Yum, and it was freaking soft, and it was great, and you could blow bigger bubbles with it than bazooka. And, there's a character named Bazooka Joe, and you got a little comic with Bazooka Joe wrapped around a 2-cent piece of bubble gum that you would get at the store. And then Bubble Yum came in, and Bubble Yum was soft, and it was like a whole new revelation of bubble gum. And then all of a sudden, this rumor started to spread amongst kids that Bubble Yum had spider's eggs in it. And I shit you not. It was my first probably real experience with disinformation. And I was I said even as a kid, I wonder if Bazooka Joe is spreading. I thought Bazooka Joe was a real guy. And I was I wonder if he's telling everybody this thing, because I don't think they could put spider eggs in it, because I was, whatever thing happened. But, we all heard that there's spider eggs in bubble gum, and I'm that can't, it seems silly. And I don't think it stopped them kids from chewing it, because maybe it was whatever. We live when you're a kid, you live in a world where radioactive spiders turn ordinary people into superheroes. So I don't think the spider eggs made that much of a difference. But there's always been rumors like that. And I can tell you lots of rumors that were around that I've talked to people across the country who grew up across the country from me during the same era, and they hear the same thing. There'll be people here that heard that when they were a kid. People who grew up when I did. And so this stuff always exists. And before we get into the voiceover here, let me show his colleague here, Mika Brzezinski, talking about how it's their job to tell the American people what to think, and also how they're not spinning. This was when Joe Biden it was their first episode after Joe Biden's disastrous debate. And she says, oh, today we're not spinning. And they were spinning, and they spin all the time. And spinning is disinformation, right? It's when you're doing as the media, you're pushing a political agenda and political candidate, which you're supposed to be fact checking. You're supposed to be, like a checks and balances to. And so it's the worst kind of disinformation because people are coming to you for truth about politics and these other things, and you're shilling for somebody.
The dangerous, edges here are that he's trying to undermine the media, trying to make up his own facts. And it could be that while unemployment and the economy worsens, he could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people think. And that is our job. Okay, so as you can see, you won't see us spinning here on Morning Joe at all.
So I mentioned the movie Memento, I don't know, in a recent video, which is, was so brilliant of a movie. It had a guy, the movie started from the future and worked back to the past. And it worked incredibly because the main character had lost his long-term memory. So he only had memory of short little interactions he had, and he wrote everything down so he could put the pieces of the puzzle together. Of course, he was manipulated and worked by various people because of this inability to have to memorize everything. Yeah, what's that app that deletes everything with Snapchat? Because I had my own memory loss there, where I boiled now some ginger, turmeric, lime juice, and cinnamon. One of my viewers said it to me, and I left it on. And I realized it in the middle of my sentence, and I rushed out there because I was supposed to go turn it off before I started my video, but I didn't. But anyways, it was a brilliant idea to make a movie that way. And this is sort of the similar thing that I'm doing here, because I make these videos sometimes over days now, because I have, I'm in front of my, I have videos that are coming out like now daily and just days in advance. And so sometimes when I make these videos, some of the newer stuff I put in the front of the video, in the beginning of the video, and then work my way back through the things that led up to it, right? It just, it just frames out that way. And it's the same thing that's happening with MSNBC and this clown, CNN and Fox News and all these other media shill organizations, right? Because if you trace back the term disinformation, it was used exclusively by governments and intelligence communities. They were the ones who were putting out disinformation because they were the only ones that could, right? They were the only, they would talk about it in other countries and places, but they were the only ones who had networks. Not only did they have influence over media networks, but they had the ability to put out disinformation in the community. And of course, corporate disinformation. But the intelligence community put out disinformation in other countries and in our own countries, in our own country, in their own countries across the globe. That's what they did. A big part of their programming, the big part of their budget was about putting out disinformation. And that was used to generate fear in the masses and control them about one thing or another, right? And so disinformation campaigns were put out by big budget corporations, the intelligence community, and governments, our own government and foreign governments across the globe. That's how it worked. And in many cases, things that were disinformation became facts because the people that make things facts, whether it be scientists in some cases, whether it be the media, whether it be, government officials that declare something a fact, weren't facts, right? So something that happened that was disinformation was Dick Cheney and his neocon pieces of shit pushed Colin Powell, who was not really part of their club, and kind of forced him out there in front of the UN to describe these tools, these tubes, long aluminum tubes, as evidence of weapons of mass destruction, right? Now, Dick Cheney and the intelligence community knew this was a lie. Colin Powell didn't, so his reputation suffered, but he was put up there as a puppet somebody who was trusted. He was in charge of he was the Joint Chiefs of Staff or whatever, or Secretary of Defense or something. And Dick Cheney, it's long been documented, went into the intelligence community, which you're not supposed to do, and pressured them to provide this information that was disinformation so it could be presented to the UN, which led to the invasion of Iraq, which led to the killing and murdering of over 1 million people, most of them civilians, in the Iraq War, and destroying that country, and then the other things that preceded. So real fucking damage, right, where all these people's lives, I mean, some people lost their lives, and then other people, the people of the Iraqi country, are suffering now. Their country's like fucked up because America went in there and took out a dictator, and that's good, but whatever you leave behind is worse, right? But Dick Cheney and his company Halliburton, that rebuilds these companies, or these countries with government-funded money, walked away with billions of dollars, right? And all the other things that went with it, military-industrial complex bullshit. And so this was real bad disinformation, where 1 million people ended up dead, right? And all these other things that are disinformation that these motherfuckers push all the time. These pieces of shit like this guy here. They push out disinformation. Another example, and this is another war example, is the Afghanistan war was a complete debacle, and we all know about that. And so Biden was tasked with withdrawing the troops and leaving behind military equipment, and it was going poorly, and he was being hammered in the media. So he came out and talked about this group, ISIS-K, which was a new enemy because he couldn't talk about the Taliban because we were about to gift them $80 billion of our equipment and give the government over to them. And we're in negotiation with them, with the former terrorist group that now is the official government of Afghanistan. And so he couldn't talk about the Taliban anymore, which was the whole reason we went in there in the first place, a big part of it, because they were, shielding the so-called Al-Qaeda. That turned out to be all bullshit, right? All disinformation put out and covered by the media. And so he said, we're going to fight a new war. We're going to use drones. And within days, all of a sudden, American troops were killed by this so-called group that didn't exist until, I don't know, Joe Biden needed them to. And then he droned 8 children and like 3 or 4 civilian grown-up adults. He killed them by mistake. And this clown and all these motherfuckers never covered it. And it didn't come up in the debates with Joe Biden. He droned kids. Joe Biden is a droner of children. His policy in the American government droned innocent children. And so fuck all these guys, right? Because this is this is what they do. The disinformation they put out all the time. They tell you what the government tells you and what the CIA tells them to say, or any of the intelligence agencies. And so he's coming out and saying that this simple little story, that shit that people share all the time, that's not factual. And yes, the internet is loaded with disinformation. It's flooded with disinformation. But a lot of it has come from the intelligence community. The intelligence community, back in so many years ago, there was this giant hub of internet employees that work for the intelligence community in Washington, D.C. It was like hundreds of thousands of them. And every company has people like that are on the internet. There's disinformation shills. And people put out their own disinformation too. Sure, that happens. Dumb individual people or evil individual people just make shit up like this guy did here and post it on the internet, right? And it gets shared by people. We've all done it. We've all thought that something was real. We thought it was legitimate, and we shared it. It's just inevitable. I'm way more cautious about it now. But everything that I put out here and I say is, it's all disinformation, right? We're sifting through disinformation to find real truth. Like, that's the reality of our situation. We have to read fucking ingredients because you put poison in food. And I've talked about how exhausting it is to read the ingredients all the time. But we know the ingredients that come from this piece of shit, right, are sponsored by Pfizer and other big pharma companies because they spend so much money on these ads, which we see all the time if you watch any of these news programs or sports. If you tune on sports or ESPN, any of that coverage, you see it's flooded by advertisements for big pharma products, which of course is against the appointment of RFK Jr. So after days of Trump appointing one nightmare person after another that's a Trump loyalist to do jobs that they're not qualified for just because they're loyal to Trump, and the mainstream media melting down because of it. And there's real issue with Trump doing that. It's not like Trump is the good guy. They decide the worst one. They hear about RFK Jr. and then they're really, this is really bad because it's going to cut into their handler, their owners, the groups that sponsor them, right? They're brought to you by Big Pharma. Chris Hayes brought to you by Big Pharma, right? Like they should have a graphic of a floating dildo with Big Pharma or Pfizer, floating right around the guy's mouth while he's talking, right? Like this is, I would do that, but they demonetize the video. But that's what they should do because these guys are all, they bow before Big Pharma. And then these other agencies, whether they be CIA or the other big corporations that sponsor them, right? They have these limited windows of truth they can talk about. But Big Pharma has done so much damage to people, like the opioid epidemic, which, they talk about it in a vague terms, but billions of dollars were made and millions upon millions of people have suffered from side effects and all these things. There's 200 different drugs that cause suicidal ideation and or depression. The side effects from these things are brutal. And people all know about it because they have to talk about it in these commercials that you see when you watch these motherfuckers pretend that they're talking truth on the internet, right? And Chris Hayes is a lying piece of shit. So in his, in this goofy video over this small thing, he links all these things together. He calls Aaron Rodgers a conspiracy theorist. He links the internet and the flow of information that's destroying their model, their world model of being able to have sole control over disinformation on their networks provided for you by the CIA and these other intelligence communities and the big corporations that pay them, right, to tell you lies, verified lies, lies with check marks on them that have been, established truths in the mainstream narrative, which is 100% bullshit, and it is disinformation that is done by professionals, right? Not amateurs that spread shit on the internet, right? But that's the first piece. And then links in RFK Jr. and his anti-vax stance, and then all these other things into one nice little package, and also Trump, because this is what happens when you guys listen and get your news from the internet. You elect a person like Trump, and he points a person like RFK Jr., who's associated with people like associated with people, Joe Rogan certainly, but associated with a known liar like Aaron Rodgers and Pat McAfee, a known dunce who allows a platform for Aaron Rodgers to spread his disinformation, which is so fucking dangerous and horrible for people. So fuck you, you worthless piece of shit, right? Like this is, this is what you do professionally, and you do it for evil corporations and other people. You push out lies and things that are, are nefarious, that hurt other countries and hurt people in America, and, push poison on them. But your disinformation is the legitimate story. It's the story. But the stupidity behind this is, I've talked about what a nightmare Trump is, right? And we know about the, RFK Jr.'s unfortunate view on Israel and all these people who are, part of the mainstream, but they flirt with truth or narratives, people like Aaron Rodgers and all this other stuff, right? And so we're not like the same. I'm not the same as them. They're not the same as me. And we all have our differences in the truth community. Like a lot of the people who are, part of the truth community have links to a religion that is putting out disinformation, or their own, or they're Republicans and they lean to the right, or, whatever it is, right? But it's a big mistake for them to link us all together, right? To link us all. The beauty of the truth community is it's individual people expressing their views on things. And, people are going to get things wrong because we're flawed, and that's what we do, right? We get things wrong. And so that's going to happen. That's not like, it's like we're all, vectors of truth, right? We're going to have our own particular lens that we see the world through. We're going to have our own lack of training and critical thinking skills, our inability to have budgets and research and poll data that the mainstream people have and things like that. They use to shape the narratives that create the disinformation. Like we're picking through lies to figure out the truth, right? And people are spiritual and they don't have critical thinking skills, and yet they're expressing themselves on the internet, which is good for them, but they're limited in their ability to do so. And so individual people are not going to be barometers of the objectively true truth, which nobody is. No human being will ever be that, right? Human beings will always be subjective to whatever extent because of our egos and our emotions and things. But we're a lot better off than these guys who are professional liars that lie for professional companies that do bad shit, right? That produce an economy that's based in debt, which is a demonic economy that is fed by not only disinformation, but by hedonism and pleasure and breaking up the family and manipulating people into being slaves to this system, because people are not living their natural lives and are not connecting to God, and they don't have healthy families because all those things are detrimental to a hedonistic system that's based in pleasure and your addictions and your weaknesses. In a system that's allergic to truth, truth is its kryptonite. And so disinformation has to be pumped into the American system, American people, to keep this demonic system going. And they are the gatekeepers for this system, right? And so for him to come on this show and then try to link everybody together in a goofy little football thing that happened when their whole job is to lie to the people, right? And this is, where we're going with this, but it puts it brands us all together, and they keep on doing this, which is a mistake, because when it becomes an us or them thing, then things like Trump getting elected, even though that's a bad thing because Trump sucks in his own way, and Trump is his own, he's not a truther. And he's not a good person. And he's not the hero that people claim that you think that he is, not a champion. But he is somebody that, and the people that now are in power, and the people that he's appointing, and the sort of media, the social media waves, and all the people that are there, even someone like Joe Rogan, these people that are on, that are, again, not truthers, but are truther adjacent in their ways of being shills. Tucker Carlson, still working for the beast, but also, flirting with these ideas and, getting, these disgruntled people a place, an official place for them to go, and a landing spot, right? I should also say that Alex Jones, they sold InfoWars yesterday, and I'm going to cover that briefly. And they were gloating about that and this, evil information that's spread. Because for these guys, we're the enemy. Anybody who is more relevant and more truthful and, has there's energy behind what we do here on the internet that they no longer have because they're so limited by their corporate handlers and their narrow bandwidth of their disinformation expression, right? The lies that they've created, which is called the official story, and what they're allowed to say or not say, which is, it's just boring. Like, it's just, if it's all disinformation, their disinformation is boring and lame and without any sort of, it doesn't have any sort of pull to it, right? And so let's say everything else is disinformation. At least the disinformation is more interesting, and it's closer to the truth. All right, so that's the first introduction here, and then we're going to work back from here. But this was so egregious, I wanted to cover it first. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. This is one of the rare videos that has 3 introductions. I made a long voiceover that was supposed to go on my last video at the end, but I thought it was important enough to put it in the beginning. And then some funny Trump boop happened, and so I it wasn't fun. You'll see it in a bit. He made a statement, something I agree with that he's doing. And then he's just been rolling out these appointments. He met with a smiling Joe Biden, which I cover here. And then I get into a trailer. I don't know how much I'll be able to put in the video, but it's a kid writes to Satan instead of Santa Claus, and Satan shows up, and it's Jack Black. And a lot of non-funny comedy happens after that. But the reason I'm doing this introduction is I'm going to start making more content. I'm like way ahead of the game. This video wasn't going to go up normally till Saturday, and the news is happening quicker than that. I mean, there's so many things going on that I didn't think was going to happen. I thought I was going to get a break, and I still could get a break. Like, I don't have to cover this stuff, but, I enjoy it. And it's there for me to do. I have a lot more time. It's cold and gray. Like, it's just, there's a certain condition that happens here in the winter. It's, it gets gray outside, and it's sometimes it rains, sometimes it doesn't. But it's just dingy out there, and I don't really have that many like homesteading things to do or projects. And, I get more lazy and tired and even with that, my energy level has sort of picked up. So I have, I'm exercising and doing more stuff. And so I've also developed a way to make my videos faster. And I've been doing that now. I was only doing it some of the time, but now I'm doing it pretty much all the time. I'm cutting out some of the editing process. It's always good to make your work more efficient. So I have just more time on my hand in general. And, the need of the day is just there's more content available now than there was before the election was over. And there are big stories because Trump is, he's always been a guy who exploited the rules and loopholes, which he's doing now with these appointments. In fact, I was just watching the news, and he's been trying to convince the Senate and the House to go in recess, or the Senate, so he can just appoint people doing a recess appointment without them having to be confirmed. And he wants to do that like with his whole cabinet. Plus, he's I don't know if he's doing this intentionally, but each cabinet post that he puts out there is more controversial than the last. He did Matt Gaetz yesterday, and people are freaking out about that for him being the Attorney General for good reason, like he's a POS. He shouldn't do that job, right? And Trump's appointing just all of his thugs, like, all of his loyal thugs. And then he appointed RFK Jr. to the health secretary. And that made them all stop talking about everybody else, right? Tulsi Gabbard and Matt Gaetz and all the other controversial appointments. Like, he keeps on doing one more controversial than the next. The news is flying out, and these guys, can't. I mean, they claim that they don't like it, but they love it. Plus Alex Jones's InfoWars was sold to the Onion. I'll cover that just a little bit, maybe towards the end of the video. So, I just wanted to say these things. I'm going to produce videos every day now for a while. Maybe not every day, but like 5 or 6 a week, depending on how it goes. And, if you can't watch them, you can't watch them. There's no problem, right? You don't have to watch every minute. But there are people who will watch them, and so I have the time to do it, and there's just so much stuff to get to. Like, I have so many things on my toolbar, and I can't get to it all. Okay, so that's the first introduction. Let's get into the second one here. Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Thursday, November 14th, 2024. The date of our Lord, 2024. So, bunch of stuff to get to. I wanted to lead with a Jack Black movie that a kid writes to Santa, but instead it's Satan because he misspells it because, it's an anagram. And I don't know if I can use the whole trailer, but it's pretty effed up. I got a long voiceover I was going to put at the end of my last video about, Trump and his appointees and how it's going south. And I want to do a brief health update, some things that I've been talking about, and I've been mispronouncing them, and my wife pointed that out, and I want to get to that. And so, first, though, I want to lead with this. This I saw. I was flicking through the news channels while I ate breakfast. I saw this tail end of this on Fox News. And this is Donald J. Trump. I believe this is him, right? Let me just double check before I get myself into something here. Okay, so I just wanted to check to see if this was Fox played it, and I found a few other news organizations that were talking about it. That this is a video Trump put up on Truth Social, so I have no access to it. You always have to guard against the possibility something's been deep faked. But I do not believe that's the case here. But, I agree with what Trump is going to say here. And I think probably all of you do, most of you will. And so, if Trump does this, this would be a positive thing. Like, I'm going to talk about Trump's appointments, and not just the people, but the loyalty factor. And I'm going to go through that because it needs to be discussed. because there's real issues with that, right? But here's Trump doing something that, he caused this problem, originally because he didn't push back against it, and maybe even if he had, it was Trump's persona and the hatred for Trump that pushed the liberal agenda and pushed all these things on the American people. Remember, Caitlyn Jenner happened in 2015, and all the related things that happened directly afterwards, right at that time when Trump was president. All these things, the whole redefinition of gender, all the pronoun stuff, all these things happened directly related to Trump presidency. And he didn't push back, right? And this, and I don't know if I agree with everything he says here. Let's go through it. But the sentiment is the right thing. And there could be backlash. Like Trump could fail and the Democrats can get back in and it could get even worse. Like it's just, you don't even know what's going to happen, right? Like that's the problem with this. We're in a time of extremism and not good extremism. It's extremism within a bandwidth of limited truth, right? Limited things you can talk about in terms of what the official people were willing to allow to be said, right? The official people, the gatekeepers of the official story. But anyways, here's Trump.
Here's my plan to stop the chemical, physical, and emotional mutilation of our youth. On day one, I will revoke Joe Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care. Ridiculous. A process that includes giving kids puberty blockers, mutating their physical appearance, and ultimately performing surgery on minor children.
Okay, so you don't let kids get tattoos, right? You don't let kids make decisions about something like this that's irreversible, and this is even worse than a tattoo, right, in terms of, kids being confused. Again, they're growing up in times, when kids, I remember I wore a satin jacket and did disco when I was in like 8th grade, right? And, when I was a freshman in high school, my buddy and I built a zip line. And he was a little bit, maybe 2 years younger than me, year younger than me or something. 2 years maybe. But he had built a zip line before his brother had. And we used wire, and we were too lightweight to get the wire very tense. So the wire was completely bowed, like it, sagged. And we built it from one tree, which we had built a platform, which was, like 30 feet above the air, above the ground. And we were to jump off and ride the zip line down to the base of the tree that it was there. And my friend went, like he was crazy. And like then I had to go. Like I knew it was like effed up. And I went and I landed over, like I was probably, my feet were like 6 feet off the ground because the bowing of the wire made it that we didn't reach the wire was probably about 5 feet off the ground. We jump off as we came close to the tree. We didn't slam into the tree, but it didn't go that fast. It just had this one. The thing was just this thing on a pulley. It was a handle. We were holding onto the handle with both hands with a round pulley in the middle. Completely sketchy. And so my friend went again, and I decided that I would jump and give myself momentum and go faster. And I woke up in the hospital with a concussion, right? So, I've talked about this in a recent video. And it was really stupid. Like, I just knew better and whatever. I started getting migraine headaches after that. Just, not good things, right? And so, we make bad decisions when we're young. If I would never want to live with the decisions I made when I was a kid. You have to, without, parental guidance. And if you allow kids just to go off on their own, they'll make bad decisions, right? They'll make good decisions at times, but bad decisions. And with the pressure, the societal pressure that's going on and pressure from their parents, this stuff with people, these kids getting reaffirming surgeries at a young age, when my kids grew up, we had a dress-up box. It had all these things we had, just whatever it was. The kids would dress up in different things. We had like some helmet, like a sword for like a knife, a knight, and there's these different costumes and things like that. And there was dresses for the girls. And occasionally, one of my sons would put on a dress, or the girls would put him in a dress or something like that. That didn't make him trans, right? Or if my girls embraced some masculine, stuff that was in there. It didn't make them trans, right? It just made them kids who are, play acting and playing and things, right? But nowadays, parents might look at this and say, my kid's trans, and start pushing that on them before they're ready to make a decision, right? About any kind of thing like that. And so anything that's done for kids has to be done in a way where there's some parental guidance and also some, knowledge of this. So this is a positive thing what Trump's doing, because this stuff that had been passed was insane, right? Because it was allowing kids and sometimes forcing kids or encouraging them to make life-altering decisions at a young age.
Can you believe this? I will sign a new executive order instructing every federal agency to cease all programs that promote the concept of sex and gender transition at any age. I will then ask Congress to permanently stop federal taxpayer dollars from being used to promote or pay for these procedures.
Okay, so we all agree we don't want to pay for them, right? We don't want to pay for other people's elective surgeries. Again, this doesn't affect me and what people believe and do. It does affect us to some extent. But if we have to pay for it, or it's something where you can't verbalize your opinion about it because you're accused of hate, well, that does affect you, right? Like if I don't hate anybody, and certainly not any specific group, right? Just based on the demographic. Because there's people like me in every demographic. There's people who have a similar personality type and demeanor. Not that that's the barometer for me liking or disliking people. In fact, I don't get along with people like me, right? So that's, but there's likable people in every demographic. There's good people in every demographic, right? And so, I don't care about these things in terms of people's personal choice, but there is forcing people to speak a certain way about other people in terms of the pronouns, and then calling it hate when you question, some of these things, which are, everything should be able to held up to scrutiny, right? We'll get back into this.
And pass a law prohibiting child sexual mutilation in all 50 states. It'll go very quickly. I will declare that any hospital or healthcare provider that participates in the chemical or physical mutilation of minor youth will no longer meet federal health and safety standards for Medicaid and Medicare, and will be terminated from the program immediately. Furthermore, I will support the creation of a private right of action for victims to sue doctors who have unforgivably performed these procedures on minor children. The Department of Justice will investigate Big Pharma and the big hospital networks to determine whether they have deliberately covered up horrific long-term side effects of sex transitions in order to get rich at the expense of vulnerable patients, in this case, very vulnerable. We will also investigate.
So again, I think this is mostly a good thing. I don't see anything bad about this, right? Because this is about federal tax dollars going to this. And so, in terms of infringing on people's rights, the government isn't on the hook for this, right? It shouldn't be on the hook for this. And so, if people are going to do this on their own and they become adults or whatever, and I don't know what the age would be and, when he would, what he's doing is scaring doctors away from liability, like being liable for some kid saying, I didn't want this. A kid who gets this done when they're 9 and then they turn, 18, they're like, oh my God, you guys fucked me up, right? And so, and suing them. And so that will get rid of a lot of these things. And I don't know how this plays out. I'm sure the people in this group or movement will be upset by this. But again, kids aren't ready to make decisions like this.
Whether Big Pharma or others have illegally marketed hormones and puberty blockers, which are in no way licensed or approved for this use. My Department of Education will inform states and school districts that if any teacher or school official suggests to a child that they could be trapped in the wrong body, they will be faced with severe consequences, including potential civil rights violations for sex discrimination and the elimination of federal funding. As part of our new credentialing body for
he's coming in hard. This is, again, I don't have a problem with this. It's just that, Trump, when he's right about things, it's great. But when he's not, it's an issue, right? And he's not right about a lot of things. Of course, there's his ear where he faked the shooting. Like he's not above making mistakes. He makes a lot of them. He makes mistakes all the time. If he comes in this hard on everything, just because this is a good thing, but I'm not gonna, minimize that this is. I'm happy to hear what he's saying here, right?
Teachers, we will promote positive education about the nuclear family, the roles of mothers and fathers, and celebrating rather than
Nuclear family. Like we should get rid of the idea of the nuclear family, right?
erasing the things that make men and women different and unique. I will ask Congress to pass a bill establishing that the only genders recognized by the United States government are male and female, and they are assigned at birth. The bill will also make clear that Title IX prohibits men from participating in women's sports, and we will protect the rights of parents from being forced to allow their minor child to assume a gender which is new and an identity without the parent's consent. The identity will not be new, and it will not be without parental consent.
I'm not sure what even said that.
No serious country should be telling its children that they were born with the wrong gender, a concept that was never heard of in all of human history. Nobody's ever heard of this, what's happening today.
Well, it actually has, Babin. This has been a real thing. It's a real thing. I would say this is a real thing, and I'll give my take on it in a moment.
It was all when the radical left
Okay, so I don't know why this cuts off. So he posted this on Truth Social. Somebody clipped it, and then maybe this is all that they could put on Twitter. I don't know. I don't have the whole rest of it, but we get the general idea here. Okay, so first let's just establish a baseline of truth here. What Trump said about transgenderism not being a part of any history except up until recently with this liberal agenda, that's not true. And Trump didn't push back against it when it was happening. And I know he must have known transgender people because, they're in the modeling industry, which he was a part of. And they're, they're in the gay community. And he was, he's not anti-gay and anti-gay people. And there's gay behaviors in nature and throughout history. And so, for example, when you don't have a male like goat or a male cow, and even rooster, we have a rooster who's trans. We have a chicken who, when there isn't a rooster, she starts crowing. And she does it occasionally. I think she stopped laying eggs, I don't know. She's a rooster that my wife calls Fancy, and I called Earrings because she has these kind of an odd, almost like these colorful bits of flesh right below her ears, so like the kind of breed she is. But she behaves like a rooster. She was very dominant and aggressive with the chickens, the other chickens. She definitely laid eggs at some point, but I don't know if she's older now. Some of our chickens just stop laying eggs, and they're just like hanging out. And she tries to crow, and it's kind of hilarious. In fact, I have a video. Let me put the video up here, if I have it. Well, I have it. I think I definitely have it because I didn't erase it, but God knows where it is. Can't remember the time period. I sent it to my wife. I think it was back in the spring, so I'm not looking for it. But anyways, these type of behaviors exist. When we had cows, what they do is if you have just female cows or male cows, the way you would tell your cow was in heat if you wanted to inseminate the cow is you would put these little paint pouches on the base of the cow's spine. And the other cows will mount the cow. The female cows will mount the other cows if there's no male present, if she goes into heat. And you see these behaviors. The goats used to mount each other. Some of them were just signs of dominance. So, these types of behaviors exist in nature. Homosexual behaviors, animals, engaging in some sort of sexual activity, same-sex, behaviors. And then there's this in history. There's been gay people and trans people throughout history. History we know about, history we don't know about, but there have just been these people. So there's a thing there. There's something there. It's not, some made-up thing, right? There's something there. They call them twin spirit people in the Native American culture. in the Mahabharata, there was a guy who he had some kind of special spiritual blessing that no man could kill him. He was one of the heroes, and there was a person that was born as a woman but transformed into a was born as a man but transformed into a woman that was in the battle that was pivotal to kill the guy, right? So there was stuff like that. The heroes, the Pandavas, had to hide out for 7 years. They were banished for 7 years, and if they were discovered, they would be banished or killed or something. And one of them hid out like in a place with the ladies and dressed up like a woman, like some sort of royal court, right? It exists in the Mahabharata, and they're very there's groups of these men who dress up like women there, and they're supposed to curse you if you don't give them money. If they're like beggars, and it's a very conservative culture, but they have some of these things in it, and it is just accepted or not or whatever, but by some people or not by others, but this exists. This culture exists. Trans people have existed for a while, and so you can't slam people for something that is just a part of human condition. Like you could say it's a mental illness, or you can attribute different things for it, and they just have this compulsion, and they don't want to have it. Most of these people, I mean, if you look at the transgender community, the life expectancy, I mean, when I first started reporting on it, it was 32 years. The highest rates of suicide and drug addiction and abuse in relationships and inability to get or keep a job, right? All these things. So it's a community that has suffered, people who have this condition, whatever you attribute it to. It's not a great thing to have, like for people who have it. Like they're not psyched about it, right? If they, I mean, same thing with people with varying types of people who have been sexually abused and then have these deviant sexual habits and things. This happens with so many people, young kids, they're sexually abused, and then they're attracted to other kids because they were sexualized at a young age, and their victimhood has created these compulsions in them. I mean, I worked in this industry, this as a counselor, and you have to feel some compassion for these people, these kids, and even as adults, because they have these compulsions, right? And it sucks for them. Even in prison, they're regarded as the worst of the worst. So there's things that happen in the human condition. Sometimes social things happen, abuse happens, that twists a person into something other than, what is the normal type of behavior. That all species, there's a way that we reproduce. Some species, like an amoeba, splits, but almost everything else is binary. There's two sexes, and it's for reproduction. The two sexes come together and produce, a third member of their species, right? In one way or another, whether it's hatching eggs or it's, that's the mammal model where we, have, some gestation period and the baby's born. In some cases like the kangaroo, the baby's not fully really able to function right off the bat, and the kangaroo keeps them around. Some of these other babies, like dogs, are born with their eyes closed and blind, and they're not ready to walk for a certain time. Where you have cows and other herd animals, and those babies have to be up on their feet that day or they're getting eaten. Like they have to be ready to walk in day one. Some of the other, creatures like all of us, we have these developmental milestones and things, which I'm actually going to talk about at the end of the video. But in terms of the trans community, the Hollywood culture and the modeling industry and the people, the so-called elite establishment, they've been pushing this on people and have been into it for a while. For whatever reason, they're pushing this on the American people, and they have been. Again, not in the sense of there's a condition here that some people have, and what's the best way to deal with it for everybody in society. They decided to say this is normal behavior. It's something that maybe everybody has a little bit of this in them, right? And that any question of its legitimacy, you're labeled as a homophobic, trans-hating person, right? Like you weren't able to question it. But the big question is, if your soul is put in the wrong body, how does that happen, right? Like how do you get into the wrong body? What is being put in the wrong body? Is it a soul? Because there hasn't been any coherent explanation. And the DSM-5 used to characterize people like this with a psychological condition, and all the related behaviors, a high suicide rate, abuse, high rates of drug abuse, and lots of at-risk behaviors in a very short lifespan, high suicidal rates, would indicate that this is probably would be considered some sort of pathology. But the DSM-5, I think it was, changed gender identity disorder into something called gender dysphoria, and that was making it less of a diagnosis, where it was a disorder before. Now, and this is completely arbitrary. It's, the DSM-5 is not, a Bible. It's not scientifically backed by, whatever it is, right? There's some science there, some psychological science, but it's not, nearly like what you would think of physical science. And so they made this arbitrary decision in 2012, and that opened the door for some of these other things, right? Where it was considered dysphoria as opposed to a disorder, a change in the wording of it. But in terms of an explanation for it, a soul is not gender-based. Your soul is neither male or female. Your soul isn't going to always be born as a male or a female depending on what you are now. Your soul will be born as both if you have multiple lives. And eventually it will be born as in various races, it's not going to be the same race, the same gender. You're not going to be the same person over and over again. You're going to experience a lot of different types of human conditions, right? I mean, that's how the past life theory is, and it's been developed where it originated in ancient India 200,000 years ago or so, when people first discovered the essence of a soul. And a soul doesn't have any attributes at all. Your soul is just the essence of your life. It's a spiritual entity. It doesn't have a physical existence until it creates one. And so it doesn't need a gender, right? It doesn't need a sex. It doesn't need to have a sexual identity. It's just a soul, right? Your soul doesn't have sexual behaviors when it's not in a physical body. But according to like ancient yogic teaching, which I find I like to find this the best explanation for everything. We have what's samskaras, which is past impressions from a previous existence. And so if you were an addict in a previous life, then you're going to have some sort of addiction in a future life, right? You're going to carry that with you. Anything that dominates your existence, something like an addiction or, criminal behavior things, there's going to be consequences and, similar issues for you moving forward. If you're somebody who committed suicide, then the conditions for you to commit suicide again in the future will be there because you've engaged in a behavior. And if you committed suicide, you were really depressed and you were really focused on, you get into a negative way, you go down a dark psychological path, and that forms deep spiritual impressions which you take with you in a future life. I've explained samskaras multiple times in various videos. They're impressions you take with you. And so if you had some issues, gender-based issues, whatever you were in a previous life, maybe you're carrying something over from a past life, and then you incarnate in, and you still have memories of that, and maybe it was something that you didn't die well. There's some, confusion, like people who die with a sense of, faith and spiritual purpose and transition from this life to the spiritual life in a positive way. And there's no shock death, like a shock murder death or something where, somebody gets pulled immediately back into life, where your soul incarnates again, maybe not in the best circumstance, if you've lived a heavy life or whatever it is, in terms of spiritual grossness. This is my explanation for it. I'm not saying this is like the word of God, but this is my understanding. But doesn't what I say make sense here, just as an explanation, right? If there is a past life, but there has to be a past life if you believe in a soul. Like if you're someone saying that you're trapped in the wrong body, that your soul was put into the wrong body, that you should have been put in a girl's body or a boy's body, that somebody made a mistake. God made a mistake. Who made a mistake? You made a mistake, right? So, I was going to say this, and I talk about character at the end of this video. I get into character development. And my understanding, when people say I didn't choose to be born, like you say this to your parents. It's like this sort of like, a big fuck you to your parents. Like, like it's not my fault I'm a piece of shit. You chose to bring me into this world, right? And it's kind of something your parents really can't argue with you because they feel responsible for their, like even though, it's a total weak argument. But in reality, you do, because if there's a soul, then your soul is choosing to be born, right? I mean, if you have that kind of consciousness, right? If you're, I mean, like most people who say that, like I didn't choose to be born, they're not suicidal. Like if they're suicidal, that's something else. But they're enjoying their life, but they use it as a weapon when they're, called on their bullshit. Well, a kid does, right? But your soul manifests your body, to my understanding of how this works. And if you had a soul, that's how it would have to be. So if you believe in a soul, you believe in God. And if you're somebody saying that I was trapped in the wrong body, then you have to attribute something that is an essence of who you are is different than what your body is. And that somehow your essence got put in the wrong body. Your essence is female, but you got put in a male body. That's what you're saying, right? That's what these people are saying. And so, but, overall, like what I'm saying about people who think that they're somehow a victim of their parents' sexual proclivities and they didn't want to be born. I had an experience, a couple of them, with the soul of the kids, my kids that were born. And also, like, when there was an ultrasound and you could hear a heartbeat, and then all of a sudden there's a life and you feel the presence of the life, right? Mothers, of course, feel this more intensely because the baby's inside of them. But experience the essence of the child before the child is even born or sometimes even conceived. There's ways that you can see a baby soul that's hanging around a mother waiting for the mother to conceive it, right? And so this is, again, subtle, which I get into more at the end of this video. And so, other things like this. But in terms of your soul manifesting your body, your soul is completely manifesting your body in the circumstances to where you're being born. If there's God and there's a soul, then there's a plan. There's order to the universe. People believe in God, believe there's order to the universe, and there's no mistakes. There's no victimization. There's no mistakes, right? God doesn't make mistakes because God doesn't think, and there's a natural process, right? We have freedom of choice. We can choose things. But in terms of the natural process and divinity, there's no choice. God can only do the right thing. If you believe in God, then God is something that is not in terms of man being made in God's image, that's just some biblical bullshit. That's not real. It's also the essence of the soul. The human beings have the same ability to manifest and create that's similar to God's ability to manifest and create, but we do it by choice. Therefore, we lie, we cheat, we steal, we make bad decisions, which I cover in the character voiceover I'm putting at the end of this video because I thought it was kind of important, and now it actually has some connection to the things I'm covering here. Like this thing I didn't even know about till I turned on the news this morning. This thing with Trump saying these things, right? And so it's interesting how these things all play out and come together. But anyways, your body manifests, your soul manifests your body. If you believe in God, you believe in a plan. And if you believe in a soul, there is, some divine plan to do with your life. And so the things that are happening to you are happening for a reason. They're part of a plan that you've agreed to. So there's no mistakes, right? But you could have something like lingering from a past existence that is carried over, like past life memories and things like this. And so that could be, to me, the most likely explanation of this, right? Someone who, whatever reason, was a female in a past life, maybe had, misogynistic issues or something like that. There's something there. And so therefore they carry that in with them. And whatever, they were, or they did in their previous existence. And then they're confused, right? Because they have a new life and they're supposed to be this new person, but they're still reliving some of their past life, which we all are doing to some extent anyway, right? We have these compulsions, like a gambler can't help themselves. And they were a gambler in a previous existence. And, they're trying to fight back against it. They know it's self-destructive, but they can't. People have these compulsions inside their system. And this seems to be a compulsion of that order. It's not that much different from other things. And yet the person feels very, strongly that they're trapped in the wrong body and they want to be a female. They should be a female, and it's congruent to them. And so they have to reconcile this to whatever extent, right? And whatever you want to qualify this as a mental illness, there has to be some explanation for it. And you're not a hater because it, doesn't make sense to all of us, right? Because it wouldn't make sense to people who don't have it and aren't aware of it and can't see what's going on inside of somebody else, right? It doesn't make sense to them. Like, it doesn't make sense that, and there's no real reasonable explanation for someone being trapped in the wrong body. That, at least on a material level or scientific level, can be explained, right? If you bring in past lives, yeah, then there's a good explanation for it. There's something lingering from a past existence, and it's manifesting in a way that's making the person not be able to embrace the life that they have now because they're still held up by their previous issues that they brought in with them in this life. And if that's the case, then, there's some sort of internal adjustment that has to be made. Just like if you come in with an addiction, right? If you're someone who has an addiction, it's something that you have to overcome. You have to figure out. And, I don't know how you do that. I mean, spiritual cleaning of some scars is a part of the meditation system I do. There's a natural cleaning process of all the things that are impeding your spiritual progress. And I know of people with, who were, at least I know of people who were like bisexual or gay, and they went through the cleaning process and started to change their, this part of them, right? There's some scars were starting to be cleaned off. Like, I know of that. I didn't know any of these people personally, but I've heard of this, right? So there's a cleaning process that happens. I don't know if that'll work. It's not the cleaning process doesn't exist to change people's, these types of things. It's just there to get rid of anything that blocks their spiritual development. And sometimes this kind of thing can block somebody's spiritual development, I suppose. Again, I'm not fully aware of specific, personal examples that I know of that people have gone through this, but I've heard preceptors or other people talk about this happening for people, in the Sahaj Marg meditation that I do. But either way, like, there's an explanation for it. Whether you accept mine or past lives or you have your own, we're all entitled to our opinion because there's no concrete explanation coming from the official people. And so they did a lot of changes, the idea of like all these different genders and all these things that, people who have these things, if you listen to the explanation of the genders, they're going to have issues dealing with physical reality, like they just are. Like if you're a vapor gender or some of these genders, I read some of them a while back, there's going to be, issues that you're going to have trouble dealing with society, right? Like some of these things make you have almost impossible for people to function, like and hold a job and be in relationships and things. And so this is something to consider. Like if you're pushing this on more and more kids as as their belief system, even though for, hundreds of thousands, millions of years, whatever it is, as long as people have been here, there's been the importance of the family unit and, two biologically male and female people marrying and having kids. Like that's the fundamental building block of our society. And it needs to be upheld, right? Despite, any differences that any of us might have. Like that model, the family unit is essential to human evolution, human creation. And where it's worked really well in various Aboriginal and tribal cultures where, there's less violence and more natural living, where it's worked on a very simplistic basis, where people are pure and innocent and they have these, healthy relationships and, love relationships, and there's a loving family and there's a, productive society as you have more and more of these people, as opposed to people who are lonely and depressed and, can't function in relationships all across our society. Like the destruction of the family is a big part of the psychological aberrations that we have now. This monster DSM-5 book, right? And so anyways, I think Trump's on the right side of things here, despite, some of the questions I have about him that I'm going to talk about here. But I'm not going to slam him for something that I think is good. Like I'm not against Trump. I'm not against anybody, Kamala Harris, any of these people. If they're going to do good things, if I think they're doing good things, and they're on the side of, the right side of something, I'm going to express that, right? But there is some issues here with the way he's appointing these people that are, that the left feels legitimate red flags from. But let me get into this other voiceover I had from my last video, and because it's I'm going to transition from the positive of Trump to the the negative, and they're both there. Okay, so Donald Trump says that this is the first time this existed, right? But Donald Trump existed in this world, and this is his pal Rudy Giuliani, his recent lawyer. And Rudy Giuliani really likes to dress up as a woman. He did multiple times. I have all these images when I covered this stuff before of all these A-list actors and famous people who dressed up as women. It was a big thing in Hollywood, in politics, and this culture, this elitist culture. And so this is an old video of some kind of, they were doing some kind of promo or charity thing here. And Rudy got into he had a character that he dressed up like this woman. And Donald Trump gropes her and stuff, and gropes Rudy and these things.
Covered. It's Giuliani showing his softer side dressed in drag in a comedy skit with Donald Trump.
So I found the original footage here. Mirror's Inner Circle Press Roast 2000.
You're really beautiful. And a woman that looks like that has to have her own special scent.
Okay, so Trump, to pretend that he's not aware of this part of the culture, right? Again, I'm happy with what he's doing in terms of what he says here and some of the things he's putting to an end that I think are wrong. And yet, he's part of this culture, right? This elitist culture.
Oh, thank you. Maybe you could tell me what you think of this scent.
I like that.
This may be the best of all. Oh, you dirty boy, you. Oh.
So he snuzzled to Rudy Giuliani's fake bosoms.
Oh.
Bosoms.
Donald, I thought you were a gentleman.
You can't say I didn't try.
Okay, so it isn't like Donald Trump doesn't have some knowledge of this type of behavior and these attitudes. He's around these people, these elitist people. This is their culture. This is Hollywood culture. He's around that culture. He's known about that culture. He didn't have a problem with that culture when it was coming down in 2016. He said virtually nothing about it. And then years later, when he found out that his people are having a problem with it, he's changed his opinion or policies or whatever he's doing here. Which again, I agree with his policies, but I don't trust Trump for the obvious reasons. So let's get into the voiceover. That starts off with this other thing here, because remember what he did with Operation Warp Speed. Like, it isn't like Trump has been somebody who's can be trusted to make good decisions. Like, what if he was going to say, like, everyone was mandated to do this thing, right? We'll get into this here. Let's go to this voiceover I did for my last video here. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this video up here. I have one more meme here to show you, which you are seeing right now. And it says, when you try to inject your disciples with a lethal injection and they still vote for you. Wonderful me. I laughed at it more this time than for the first time I saw it. So something interesting happened. I finished the part of the video. I saw the meme. I'm like, oh, I want to do that. And then I started to have thoughts about what I'm about to say here. And I went for a walk with my dogs, ate lunch, and the thoughts became the introduction to my next video, and I guess the end of my next Journey series, the last voiceover in my next Journey series video. And I'm going to do the first part of it here, right? And so what we're talking about in terms of the collapse of the system is that, it happens. Like, you just have to realize this happens. Empires collapse. And everything dies. Everything collapses. Like, so it's not like crazy to think that's going to happen. But it's only important if it's going to happen like in your lifetime or the next lifetime, right? The next, 2 or 3 lifetimes. Certainly most would be something that's going to happen somewhat soon, right? anything that's going to happen 20 years from now, it's not such a big deal, right? And every religion, every tribe, every belief system, every shamanistic belief system, every, anything that existed on a spiritual level, there's a doomsday scenario there. Like everybody has a doomsday, because doomsdays fucking happen, right? You're going to die, so that's like one thing. And then lots of people are going to die at once in a, a volcanic eruption or a tornado or something. Things happen where there's like massive die-off, diseases, wars, things like that. And then there's extinction level events, right? Things of that nature. And so, all those things can happen, right? And when your society is in a situation where there's going to be a collapse, that's somewhat in the near future, then it's time to start thinking about it. Like it's just, thinking about it beforehand, you're just some crazy end of the world doomsdayer. And if it's, and it's not that you're wrong because it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And in terms of all of us in America, like the collapse of America, it would be, how much is America left? Like, is there a place called America? Is there a government? Is there, electricity in some places? Is there, some of your lifestyle? Is some of the system still functioning? Is it a complete knockout blow to the system? Or is it just a series of knockout blows, whatever it is? Is it quick? Is it, and is it one that just puts you over the edge? And so, like, that's all part of it. Like, you don't know what it's going to look like. It's going to be, are we going forward or are we going backwards, right? Right now, are we in the collapsing stage or are we in the growing stage, right? Are we in the creative stage or the preservation stage or the destructive phase stage, right? But for most of us, we can see that there's going to be probably some sort of a collapse in the system. That's why people are desperately hoping Trump will save them, people who believe that this is possible. So, they're desperate, and that's a part of it. I'm just going to go ahead and do the toll talk here, and I'm going to put it in the beginning of my next video, the video you're watching now. I was going to put it at the end of my last video, but I think this is profound enough it should be at the beginning, because if it put at the end, a third of the people will get to hear it. So when I think something's important, I'll stick it in the beginning or whatever. This is more of a introduction. It's also, my last video was about Trump's appointments. The first part was about the woke culture and how it was destroyed, the video I'm finishing up today. And so it's 2 hours long already, and I put this at the end. Nobody will, get to hear that. So the first part is about the woke culture. The second part was about how Trump was, his appointments are disastrous, right? He appointed these people who are Trump believers, at least they tend to be, and they're going to execute his plan. And the part of this audio that's about that is that, when something's terminal, when something is about to collapse or, has got cancer, like, for example, a system has cancer, like a person has cancer, right? And there's a point where you can't, you can't come back from it. I was thinking about, there's someone in my wife's family that has a situation. And, my dad had problems with dying. Some people death is a little bit harder for them. They're just terrified of it, right? And this person is like my dad in that way. They're not prepared for it. And they're not great people. It's not like they're great people that people are going to miss. For the most part, maybe one or two people. My dad, nobody. Like, I don't think anybody was going to miss my dad when he died. I mean, maybe, just like on superficial level. But I don't think that, I don't know anybody in my family. I don't think anybody really did. But anyways, there's people who have trouble dying. And this particular person has like 4 to 5 kinds of cancer and then other issues. And chemotherapy is not responsive. Not that it's, I don't tell people what to do. I'm not suggesting anything. But, for me, I don't think I would go down that path, right? I would try to find another way. There's alternative ways of going about it. But again, it's for each person to decide. But for this person, the person's gone to the doctor. This person's, a doctor themselves or was one. And the medical staff has made multiple bad mistakes that have made the person suffer more. And they're suffering from treatments that there's no way the treatments are going to make the person better, right? They're just not. And their treatments are making them worse. And it's not slowing down the process. So, your last days, if you take that route, when you know that there's not really much of a chance or not really a chance, and you can kind of see it, then wouldn't it be better just to enjoy your time and allow the natural process or whatever, the unnatural process in a cancer situation, overtake it, right? You're going to die. You're now in a terminal state. And so why spend so much time in these hospitals and getting these treatments? I mean, it's for each person to decide for themselves, but, it can expedite, the doctors often expedite the death process. Or at least, you might live a little bit longer, but in terms of your life, it's over, right? Your life is, once you're in that process, you're no longer living a life. You're spending most of your time in the hospital in bed. You're walking around with, equipment, whatever, respirators and shit like that. And, it's just, you're not able to enjoy anything, and you don't get to spend time with the people that you love. And, you're not clear because you're taking kind of these medications that distort your ability to understand reality around you, whatever, pain medications, things like that. And so you die, maybe prolonged horrible where you're in a horrible state of being, right? But oftentimes they don't prolong your life, they just expedite it because they just start taking you apart, and it just makes things worse. And the cancer might go to different places and, causes other problems in your system. We've seen this with medications. And so it actually expedites your death, the medical process, right? And somebody like Trump, like what I was going to say about that, in terms of his looking at the system and saying, well, the system's fucked, right? Which it is. It's a bad system. It's corrupt. But coming in as an outsider, thinking he knows better, and then you take something apart and you remove it, and the thing that you remove sucks, but it just makes everything worse, right? Like it's like you're removing something that's blocking other stuff, and then things get much worse. You're like, oh, I guess that thing I shouldn't have removed it, right? And that's the kind of guy Trump is, but he doesn't doubt his own. He's not a thoughtful person, and believes his own bullshit, which I talked about in my last video. And so that was that part of this thing, that you just can't take something away and destroy things and, hope that your solution makes it better when you have no evidence to support that. There's no testing. There's no, you're a complete newbie, inexperienced person doing something. And that's the danger of the Trump presidency, because the best that we could hope for in terms of the system, I mean, I think the best thing we could hope for is that the system collapses before more and more damage to the environment and the world is done. But that's not going to happen because the system is going to go out really badly. So that's already in the works. And so in terms of our egos and our personal lives and us having to adjust to a collapsed system, we would want to prolong it, right? We'd want to prolong the collapse of the system and make it, less than, just minimize it, maybe adjust to our new lives, adjust to what's going to be. That would be the best thing. If we all accepted the system going down and just accepted it, there's no reason fighting it. And let's embrace what it's going to be, and maybe, don't, bring the world with us, right? Don't destroy the world in the process. Don't destroy other habitats, other life forms, and, things like that, wars, and, all of it. Just accept that this is a failed system, and just, while it's collapsing, adjust to the new way it's going to be. This is pockets of the future. This is the essence of the pockets of the future movement. I mean, it's not movement because I'm not, idea. I mean, people are doing it, not just people have heard about it here. People have never heard of me or the idea. Some of them are already a part of the pockets of the future, whatever it is that, they're living now. They're starting to adjust themselves to what it's going to be like later. Even some people are doing that without even knowing they're doing that, or they're being prepared and they're not sure why, they don't know they're being prepared for this. So anyways, so that's the first part. And so the next part is, I want to talk about death a little bit. And this is the part I was going to separate out, because I thought about this and I thought about my own death process, right? And, I made a video, and I think I have a playlist. If I do, I can separate this out and put that out just for that playlist, which is, I made a video about, in case I die, people could listen to the video. You know, it was just my thoughts in a post situation where I disappeared, or, you know, I wasn't on the internet or something where my channel just disappeared and I did. You know, it was something that people could listen to, and I thought, well, I'll make a lot of videos that have to do with that, and this will be one of them. So, and then, of course, putting this in my Journey series because it's important as well. So it's going to be in 3 different places, but it's, you know, significant. So, you know, I am aware as I've gotten older that, you know, you start to prepare yourself for death in a way. You're more conscious of it. Now, I'm still in pretty good physical shape, you know, just little nagging things, but I don't have anything bad. I've never had cancer. I've never had anything severe. Probably the COVID or mono when I was a kid, chickenpox, mono, and then the two hard COVIDs were my worst times I was sick. You know, I had I was in a cast for a while. I fucked up one of my ligaments in my ankle playing basketball. I rolled my ankle, and you know, other than that, I haven't had a lot of horrible things. You know, I fell off a zip line when I was 14 and was knocked unconscious for about 12 hours. So that was probably the worst thing. I almost died. You know, so, but that wasn't like, you know, I mean, that was just more of an accident than anything else, or just stupidity. It was more stupidity. It was definitely 80% stupidity, 20% accident, 90% stupidity maybe. But anyways, like, you know, it isn't like it's just staring me in the face, but, you know, I'm slowing down and I'm aware of my age. And I'm also aware that, you know, some part of me will look forward to death, especially the older I get. And, you know, not that I'm suicidal or I think about it because I'm like so miserable I want to get out. It's nothing like that, but just, you know, it wears on you. Life wears on you. And, you know, in a natural process, when you die, you know, naturally in some way of old age, you know, as you get older, it becomes easier and easier for you to let it go. I mean, it's like a physical shift, and then your spirit, you know. Well, I've had these experiences. You know, when you meditate, like you use a quality system, you should be having different types of spiritual experiences, like real ones, not some, you know, bullshit ones that are induced by some, you know, LSD or something like that, which, you know, can also be real to whatever extent, but they're not the same, right? Something that comes out of a legitimate process. And the transmission that's given in the Sajmarg method, you know, what we call gratefulness meditation now. I mean, the experiences I've had are just amazing. You know, I have a number of experiences where I've gone into some samadhi-like state and, you know, spiritual gatherings that I got into a deep spiritual condition, and I didn't want to come back out again. Like, I didn't want to go back to the world. Either I didn't want to return to the world from the gathering. Like, there was just this, you know, you have moments in your life of bliss and, you know, love and, you know, like maybe like a honeymoon or something, or a vacation, or, you know, you get really close to somebody, intimate with somebody, your spouse, you know, whatever it is. And you don't want to, you know, you don't want that time to end. Like, it's just a beautiful time, right? A magical time, you know, when a baby's born or something, when they're first born. There's just these things that happen in people's lives, and you just wish the day would last forever. You wish that you didn't have to go back and face the crappy world. It's like an oasis that you have. In the Sajmarg meditation, you have these spiritual oases and in meditations that you don't want to return back to the world. Like, you just want to, there's times I just want to stare at the wall and just exist in that, you know, that spiritual condition for forever. I just didn't want to, you know, which is something you have to watch out for because there's always something more significant down the road. You can't get caught up in a spiritual state, no matter how pleasurable, how serene, how peaceful it is. You know, you have to keep on moving forward. But there are times where I, you know, didn't really want to return to my body. Like, I was just, you know, I was happy. I don't want to say happy. It was just better. And there are other times, even before I started meditating, but certainly afterwards, where I recognized how heavy my physical body was. Like, just dragging it around, like my soul dragging it around. And how heavy it was to be in third dimensional reality. And so I had a number of experiences like that, where it was just my body was like physically heavy. And I just, you know, I mean, there was times when the second COVID that I had was really bad. And maybe it was a third one even. The third wasn't so bad, but I think I had a couple days of the third one. You guys might remember the videos because I talked about it. there was this one day where I lost all life force. Like I just couldn't even get out of bed to go to the bathroom or something. Like I just, I didn't know if I could physically get myself to move. Like I was so, like I had no life force. And then, of course I could, I wasn't that sick that I couldn't get out of bed and go to the bathroom. I lacked the energy to get myself like the life force. I didn't, it was like I just was like there was nothing there. There's no strength. And I just was like laying there. I think I slept for like almost 24 hours. And I was like, there's no vital energy, right? And so, even though that was the COVID that hit me the least, I just was so tired and just so worn out. And, I had that like lack of whatever it was. But it wasn't a pleasant thing. It wasn't a spiritual thing. It was just, no strength. And, as you get older, those things like tend to happen to you when you get sick and whatever, because your life force is being diminished. But anyways, going back to it, just the heaviness, the weight of the body. When I first went to, like I became a preceptor and I was going to go to India, and I drove across the country in a Toyota Tercel and had all my worldly possessions packed in a small compact car. And I drove from Massachusetts to New Mexico, and then I went from New Mexico, I flew to India, and then I came back. And within a year, I was married, and my ex had 2 kids, and within 2 years, I had 2 kids and a third one on the way. And I had got one back to school and got my master's degree. And I was driving the biggest U-Haul truck, a 26-foot truck you could rent, from New Mexico to Idaho where we were moving. And my ex was driving our minivan. And with, these kids, I had I think 2 kids with me in the front seat of the truck. And then there were, she was with 2 kids in the van and, pregnant with a third. And I looked in the rearview mirror and the truck was like huge, just the physical heaviness. We had a 16-passenger van and I had driven some vans. And when you drive some of these vehicles, of course, I rented a bulldozer. But you can feel the weight of them, like as opposed to a small little car. So I'd come to New Mexico in this Toyota Tercel, and everything I owned fit in it. And here I was driving this big giant truck, and I'm like, "What the hell happened?" Like I had this moment where, like, "What the fuck happened here?" Right? It was only like 3 years, less than that, right? And boom, 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 boom. Like it was like like within a 3-year period, and it didn't seem like that long a time, because it happened so quickly. And so, but I remember the weight of it. And every time, I've moved, especially having a big truck, if I've driven the truck and, putting all the belongings, the family stuff, and, going to India was another way where when we went there for an extended period of time, we had 2 50-pound suitcases and a carry-on, and each one of us had these things filled. And we still were able not to bring, a fraction of our things, right, all this stuff. And I could see the weight of it. There was a time where all our stuff was piled together at the airport, right? And like, Jesus, we're taking up like 20 feet of space in the airport with all our junk as we were, getting ready to load it, onto the airplane. And so, lugging that stuff around and, and then the physical aspect of it. And there's times where I've like felt my physical body to be just like a burden. Of course, people all have, dreams of flying and things where you're so light and you feel so good, and it's like you're astral projecting. And so the soul being freed up from the body, like I've been aware of that. And it just feels like, the experiences I've had with that are like substantial, where it's just like, it's like a burden, like physical life is a burden, right? The other thing is, and I've talked about this in my Journey series, there was a time where through the meditative process, deep down, your soul craves to reunite with God, right? It's, it's phrased as the lover and the beloved. God is the beloved, and you're the lover. And you love God so much, there's a part of you, the soul, the essence, your true essence, and there is the pain of love. Like there is this craving to reunite and be back in the source. And it's like the most powerful thing if you get in touch with it, right? There's just this deep pain and longing and compulsion to merge back with the source. And it overshadows everything. It's not in a sense that it's overbearing or it's powerful or it's gross. It's a subtle thing, but it trumps everything else. Like when you feel it, nothing else matters. None of your petty little pleasures or things or whatever's going on in your life. It's all you can think about. And I had this experience, I think it was either 3 months or a month. Like I feel like it felt like a long time. And I couldn't do anything else. Like I lost motivation for worldly life. You know, in the Sajmark system, you're not supposed to start meditating until you're 18. But people start when they're 18, you know, they have limited experiences. You know, when you're young and you're in your physical body and you're just starting your life, it's hard to focus on spiritual things. Like you can have your moments and things. You know, I started when I was 29 and I had these profound experiences. That was another experience. You know, I first meditated, when I was 29, 1993. You know, my first 3 sittings, I felt a transmission. I had this deep feeling. Like first I felt like something was being pulled out of my system. Like it felt like something, like somebody's etheric hand was reaching down my throat and pulling something out of my heart. And like I couldn't breathe. Like I physically lost the ability to breathe. I felt this tension. And it was like almost something was being yanked out of my, you know, like the alien you see in the alien movies, that, you know, the face hugger. Like something like that didn't want to leave. It was being pulled out of my system. And I felt this immediate release, and I had this deep laugh. Like a deep, you know, I mean, in terms of the, like a soul, like I was laughing for my soul. And the idea was that, you know, all these things that you try to do or people are trying to do in their material lives, and the real thing, you know, your real goal, your journey, your ultimate goal is just right there inside of you. And you're spending all your time being focused on the external world. But I just laughed. I had this deep laugh, like just internally. It was just this joy and this laughter, and you know the feeling of it. And the guy who was a preceptor, like he was giving me this sitting, the energy's passing through him, and the sitting didn't know what was happening because it was just a normal sitting to him. But I had these extraordinary experiences, right? You know, that life is an absolute joke, and you know, and I returned to that quite a bit, you know, where I realized that all these things are, you know, meaningless, that all these things that we stress out over and seem so important to us, and all the, you know, things that would gotta happen, and, you know, all the things that we try to control and all these things, and really it's not at all important. You know, I think all of us understand that on some level, and we have our moments, but I had this like deep, profound experience of it. And then later on I had that experience, maybe 1990, I don't know, 2000, maybe 2001, around that time. I had that experience of the, you know, all the things I'm talking about. Probably 2002, 2003, where I had the experience of the deep inner craving and condition of the longing to return to the source. And so, you know, having these experiences, and they're easy to have as your body starts to break down. You start to transition over to the spiritual side, and, you know, your soul starts preparing itself to exit out of the, you know, your physical body and return to wherever it is on the spiritual plane of existence. And you start to spend more time wandering off. You know, that's how as older people should go about it, right? And the good thing about living in this particular time in history, and things aren't being taken for granted, because you know they can disappear at any moment. Like everyone kind of has a sense, like at any moment things can go south quickly. We all feel it. You know, you see animals fleeing an area, like animals get a warning and they realize, you know, a hurricane's about to hit. I mean, it happens quite frequently. And everyone, you know, people have those kind of abilities. We've lost the intuition, but, you know, it's there. And people have a sense that things are about to get real, especially when so much of our lives, of course, now with the internet even more so, are about distraction us away from what's important. I mean, just even what's important in our lives, our families, our kids, you know, the things that are important to us, like real things, substantial things. And most people are disconnected from those things. And all of us are to some extent. And now with the internet, I mean, we're living in these alternative realities, right? And not in the real world on top of it. And so, you know, it's hard to really experience life. And people are drugged. I mean, most people have experienced are using some sort of conscious altering drugs, whether they're prescription or self-medicating. And of course, things like the television and these other things warp our consciousness and our hypnosis, and they mess with our brain patterns, our alpha waves and beta waves and these things. And so, we spend a lot of time just we're already in this illusionary third dimensional world, and then being in a illusion within the illusion and lose sight of what's important, right? But we are on the cusp of something where there's going to be massive die-off and there's going to be systemic collapse. Like it's, might be tomorrow, it might be 10 years, it might be 20 years, who knows? It's going to be within the next 100 years, I would assume, depending how it goes, right? But, it's going to be something. There's going to be other things. We've already had some big shocks to our system. There's things that have happened, right? We've had, these various things that have happened. And they're signs of a loss of control. They're signs of a weakening system. And you can just see all around us, there's each succeeding generation gets weaker and more entitled and worse and more, worthless and more useless and more, depressed and just all these things. And this is where cultivating a spiritual relationship is so important, because you have a spiritual side. You have a side that's your soul, that's eternal, that's not going to die. You have a soul that's going to have another existence after this. I just talked about past lives recently, right? But, when your material life sucks, if you can retreat inwardly into your spiritual life and connect with that, it makes it so much easier to ride through the difficult periods. And also, you get a bigger picture, because if you put all your emphasis on your material life and your material happiness and, all those things, then, those things are going to be taken away, inevitably, whether it's a systemic collapse or it's just your body breaks down and you die or somebody you love dies or any of these things, right? Everything is subject to these, anything can be taken away. And the more you hang your hat on those things, the more that you're focused on those things, the more you're setting yourself up for the inevitably, soul crushing or spirit crushing, your life force, not so much your soul, your life, your like people have a life spirit, right? You have your soul, but there's a life spirit. And your life spirit is, the part of you that, that animates your physical body. Your soul animates your physical body as well, but I'm talking about something that's, your motivation, your enthusiasm, your emotion and things that get you, pumped up for life, that gets you enthusiastic about life and things. And those things can be taken away from you. It's not your soul, because your soul is always there, and your soul doesn't give a shit about those things, right? Your happiness, your life, or whatever. Your soul is, a constant. You have this life force that just sort of been taken out of you by, and your goals and things or whatever you have, and just, all of those things. But being able to connect with this side of you that's spiritual, and again, I was talking about this where you don't want to leave. And there's people who used to meditate and they didn't want to live physical lives, right? Spiritual saints and ancient yogis who would go into deep states of meditation, and then they would refuse to live their, you have to have a balance. You have to be able to go back and forth between your physical body and your spiritual life. But right now there's such a neglect on the spiritual side. And that's why I say it's so necessary to do that, because, if lots and lots of people are going to die off, let's say in 5 years, half the population died off, right? Or something even more significant than that. And a lot of those people are young and they're not, they have no way to prepare themselves for that. They're young and healthy and, they're not focused on any of those sorts of things. It's not something that's even on their radar, right? And so that's why connecting with the spiritual side, because on a spiritual level, when your time's going to come. I mean, there's, astrological predictions of different times. There's usually your ultimate death and also early death escape windows where death is possible. You have multiple times in your life where there's a chance that you might die and you take an early exit or something. And being able to connect with that, you can prepare you for that, right? And everyone should be prepared for this on a spiritual level. Not just in terms of their death, but also in terms of systemic collapse, and just be aware of, it isn't the end of the world just because America collapses. Just because there's no grocery store doesn't mean you won't eat, right? It just means you're going to have to change the way that you go about things. And having some spiritual experience of these things and getting in touch with, like, ultimately past experiences, past lives, and things like this is also important, because if you've died before, and if you've lived through these things before, and you're aware of it, you can connect with that. You know, I saw this Mark Wahlberg movie called Infinite, and some of the people, Mark Wahlberg was one of them, he was waking up to this. They remembered all their past lives, and they could draw from their past life memories where the rest of the people couldn't, which is kind of an interesting idea for a movie, but ended up being a bogus action movie. You know, they're with lots of flaws. You know, Mark Wahlberg kind of sucks. So, but it was, you know, an interesting idea done in a very Hollywood way. But in terms of what I'm talking about here, you know, it's good all the time, but especially now, because there's going to be changes, whether it's life or death, or it's just lifestyle changes, or just, you know, these tumultuous upheavals and things. There's going to be changes, and being able to connect to some etheric part of yourself, your soul, is like almost imperative. Like, it's just one of those things where it should be something you're doing anyway. Everyone should be doing anyway, from a, you know, I want to say a young age, but it should always be there. But certainly now. And, you know, things are going in a direction where it's going to be essential. It's, you know, people aren't going to be able to survive what's happening just mentally and psychologically without some, you know, connection to something higher and better. But anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely pointing from the apocalypse. And the ascension, everyone have a blessed day and be grateful. Okay, so I want to get into Trump appointees. I'm going to start with Mark Rubio and some of these other people. I forgot about this, so I want to go back and put this in. I've already started working on the other things. But Trump met with Jojo Magoo. Fox News alert: Biden and Trump walk. Talks.
Former President. Thank you. Donald, congratulations. Thank you. And looking forward to having like we said, a smooth transition. Do everything we can to make sure you're accommodated, what you need. And we're going to get a chance to talk about some of that today. So. Good.
So first of all, kudos on the real quality fire here. Kind of probably was pretty warm when this happened, I think. This wasn't really necessary. You're going to see Joe Biden be very happy. It's a very odd type of situation because they were going to run against each other and they had a bitter contest. And Joe Biden was robbed by his own senility and his backstabbing party on his chance for a second fight, right? A rematch. And, you know, he definitely doesn't like Kamala, and he definitely preferred Trump over the Democrats because they stabbed him in the back, right? So he's really happy. Like, this would be usually a meeting where this guy would be on his way out like Obama was. You know, he was done. Or he lost. Or this, you know, or some other variation that's like an oddity. But that would be the two main things. Like the person just lost an election or they had done 2 terms. But in this case, Biden is a one-termer, but he didn't lose to Trump. And even though Trump is in the opposition party, he wouldn't be doing this with Kamala, right? Because of, you know, all of it. And, you know, maybe they do some performative thing here, but I'm going to get into it. There's some, in my next video, I won't have time to cover in this one. But the White House press secretary asked some pretty great questions about their relationship, and her response is hilarious. But like I said, I'll do that for next video. But here's the exchange here.
Welcome
Thank you
back.
very much, and thank you very much. And politics is tough, and it's in many cases not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate.
Yeah, because, you know, I won, and like you're pissed about Kamala, so we're both in a happy mood.
Appreciate it very much. A transition that's so smooth, it'll be.
This horrific JFK bust here. I mean, it's just brutal. Like, it looks like a demon.
As smooth as it can get, and I very much.
As smooth as it can get.
Appreciate that, Joe.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
Now, he has that fake smile, but I don't think it's fake because, you know, a big part of it is like he's riding a high because, you know, Kamala's loss means for him, it's proof that he would have won and that they made a mistake. You know, they got rid of him And if he had lost, he would have lost, right? But in retrospect, she got pummeled, right? So, like, he's really giddy about it.
So there are a lot of things to gather in those few moments, which is why.
Anyway, so there was that. And then right after that, they're coming back to it here. They're coming back or they're talking about it.
Right. Donald Trump has spent his entire life in business, and then he became president and learned.
I don't know if this is when it comes in that Mark Rubio has been nominated.
Over the last 4 years, he's really come to realize.
Okay, so at some point, I had seen this yesterday. I don't know if I saw it was here, but while they were talking, Martha, whatever her name is, and the other woman were talking, Mark Rubio was nominated, and they both had like their own ghoulgasms because of, especially that one girl was having just like this ghoulgasm over the fact that he was going to pummel the Palestinians. And let me show you this clip. And they showed this clip from Mark Rubio, which I'll show you now. Okay, so let's get into this other stuff here. Let's get into Rubio here.
Senator Rubio, will you call for ceasefire?
No, I will not. On the contrary.
Rubio.
Are you filming it?
Wait,
so I want you guys to get this. I want them to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. These people are vicious animals who did horrifying crimes. And
Take it easy there, Hulkster. Take it easy there, Thor. This little binky dude, right? Look at how tough he's getting here. Let's go back to it here. Start over.
Senator Rubio, will you call for ceasefire?
No, I will not. On the contrary.
Rubio.
Are you filming it?
Wait,
so I want you guys to get this. I want them to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. These people are vicious animals who did horrifying crimes. And I hope you guys post that.
Vicious animals.
And what about the civilians that are being killed every day?
Hamas should stop hiding behind civilians, putting civilians in the way.
Okay, so this is horrible, right? This is where Trump sucks because is it Mark Rubio, Ricky Rubio? Ricky Rubio is a basketball player. From Spain. This guy's from Florida. Trump is putting in all his people and buddies, and this is Trump's position. It's also RFK Jr.'s position that the Palestinian kids can just go keep on dying at the hands of the bully Israeli army. And, Hamas is their asset anyway, I mean, if they were going to be honest. And so they're just going to give Israel a green light. Hamas isn't going to surrender because Hamas is Israel's asset. And so now they're going to have all that land, right? They're going to take that land. They're all Zionists, and Trump is 100% on board with this, right? And so let's get to the end of this thing.
Hamas knew that this was going to lead to this. So Hamas has stopped building their military installations underneath hospitals.
So you don't care that 15,000 have died? You don't care about the babies that are being killed every day?
I think it's horrifying. I think it's terrible, and I think Hamas is 100% to blame.
100% to blame, right? For Israel dropping bombs on kids and killing 15,000 people. And with American weapons. So fuck this guy and fuck Trump. And fuck, all these Zionist motherfuckers, right? Because they are endorsing Israel killing children, right? And so the death toll on the Palestinian side is far worse. And to blame it 100% on Hamas, which is more than likely an Israeli asset, false flag type of organization. So this is the kind of stuff that you get one thing from Trump, which is he did a good stuff on I agree with the gender stuff. But then this thing, at least be nuanced about this, right? That you have to stop Israel from killing kids. And it's them killing the kids. Isn't Hamas, right? And, you can always make up excuses. I mean, you could say there's terrorists anywhere and then kill civilians, saying stop hiding behind the civilians, terrorists. But we got to kill the terrorists, so if you kill some civilians, right? That's the attitude here. And you could be the civilians, right?
That's what I think. Make sure you post that, please.
So this is the problem with Trump. Trump is a man of action. Trump described the people in the Washington, D.C. as either stiffs or survivors. And they just had these jobs and they didn't want to lose their jobs and did everything they could to not do something, to not be doers, right? And Trump does things. Like he got things done. He built things. He had these goals and he succeeds in his goals but oftentimes they're disasters, right? The thing itself doesn't, it doesn't sell, or it doesn't make money. It loses money, and, a lot of things he does inefficiently, and that was just as a businessman, where he, grew up as a builder. His dad was a builder, and he had all this experience, and he still ended up sucking at that, right? Like in terms of he's good at the selling himself, but he's bad at the actual building. So Trump will do things, which is good because you don't see things being done in Washington, D.C. And like with the thing, taking action on the gender thing, well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that, right? I agree with that. But I don't agree with this, and this is kind of more important. And, he just doesn't have any, like, depth of his thought or his ability to be on the right side of things, like flipping a fucking coin, right? And he's going to take these actions because he's surrounded himself by yes men and people either believe in what he says or have agreed to just believe in what he says, right? And so, and like what I said in my last video, the people who already hold these cabinet positions all suck in different ways, and I'm sure, so you could measure their sucking not by what they believe or, but by who they are and the people that they are. But they're not necessarily beholding to, say, Joe Biden, and they weren't beholding to Trump, right? Trump knows that he fired these people, and they wouldn't do what he wanted them to do. That was what he learned, that he would hire these Washington insiders, and they had their own careers to think about, their own agendas, their own futures, their own beliefs, and they wouldn't always do what Trump wanted them to do. And that's the case with Joe Biden. Sometimes an appointment is for support, some quid pro quo kind of thing, any number of reasons somebody gets appointed. But Trump is pointing straight up people who are going to push his agenda. He's going to push it through. He has a majority in the House and the Senate. He's getting a lot of things done. Some of those things are going to be good, but a lot of them are going to be like disasters. They're going to be like their own grenades, right, that are going to go off in the future or the near future. And, this is going to be a mess. And, let's get into Matt Gaetz, because this is a good example. So Matt Gaetz is the Attorney General, and we'll see if he gets confirmed or not. And Trump has made a bunch of appointments that the person either has no experience or is controversial, and they're all very Trump loyalists in ways that you haven't seen a president do. It's like, a crime boss bringing in all of his henchmen kind of thing, right? It's kind of funny because it's driving the Dems wild, and I'll, cover some of that. But they have legitimate arguments and concerns here. So Matt Gaetz had an ethics violation where he was accused of having sex with a 17-year-old girl. I don't know that much about it. He isn't in jail, or he's still a senator or congressman, so I know that it wasn't conclusive, and I don't know what happened with it, right? But there's something slimy about this guy, and they're all slimy, but he kind of stands out.
It is going to be difficult for my Republican friends to keep calling President Biden feeble while he continues to take Speaker McCarthy's lunch money in every negotiation. Let me get this straight. To extend Joe Biden's spending and Joe Biden's policy priorities, the Speaker of the House gave away to Joe Biden the money for Ukraine that Joe Biden wanted. So for all the crocodile...
So this guy went after, he went after this guy, McCarthy. For some of it's good reason, the support for the Ukraine war and some of these other things. But the last guy, or the guy who's there now, Jones or whatever it is, Smith, I don't know. The current Speaker of the House, I can't remember his name. Don't care, don't tell me, don't need to know. And Marjorie Taylor Greene went after him and was going to do the same thing to him that Gaetz did to whatever this guy's name is, McCarthy. And Trump told her to back off. And he passed all these things too, right? He gave Biden what he wanted on the Ukraine and these other spending bills. So there's that. So it wasn't like they got rid of this other guy for doing the same thing that McCarthy did. And whatever reason McCarthy did what he did, he did. And I'm not a McCarthy person, obviously, or whatever. But Matt Gaetz, there's something just, he's very, he'd be a villain in almost every movie. Any movie he was in, he'd be a villain, right? And an unlikable one. But he got rid of McCarthy, and they've had this kind of hilarious duel where they've both what do they call it when you jump into a photo bombed, sort of video bombed each other, and they hate each other. It's kind of funny, but this guy's going to be the attorney general. It's totally not appropriate. Like, you can't be this vengeful. And well, let me just show you some of it here. So you can't see Matt Gaetz. He's it's off screen here. They have another view of it, but this is what happened here.
Being fractured in the House. I mean, what does that look like going into the next 4 months?
Oh, we're much more united. I mean, think about that. That was all the Democrats and 8 Republicans. One who's not coming back, and then the other part that you have, and the other part you have is one person who raised the issue. He's got an.
Okay, so he's talking shit off stage, and now he starts talking about him because he's been attacked.
Ethics complaint about sleeping with a 17-year-old. So that's the way they would go. So that's the biggest challenge we have.
So he interrupted his sentence to point out that Matt Gaetz had a complaint, an ethics complaint for sleeping with a 17-year-old girl. If it's true, that would be completely fucked, right? And that if that guy was the attorney general and he's like a little, Jeffrey Epstein, who Trump has embraced before, and so Kevin McCarthy, he's his own scumbag, but Matt Gaetz is mad at him for not protecting him from the ethics complaint, and then went after him when he got a chance, and he got rid of him as speaker. They voted him out, and they're both bitter. There was another exchange. I can't find it. I'll look for it after I get through these to see if I can find it. But they interrupted. They yelled at each other again at another place, and so I think he bumped into him. Let me see if I can find that. Let me get the other angle here first.
Speaking. What night are you speaking? Are you speaking tonight?
Okay, so he wasn't speaking. This is at the RNC. So he's trolling because he is in a spot speaking. Trump wouldn't let him speak. And, they was trolling him there.
One person, Hey, you're not. If you took that stage, you would get booed off of it. You would get booed off the stage.
So, kind of like, I think it's funny, first of all. I like this kind of thing. But this guy should not be the attorney general, right? You can't be this petty. And again, he doesn't have some experience within the, it's good to have some experience, even if these government agencies are completely corrupt and there's a lot of bureaucracy. It'd be good to have some of this type of experience. And he doesn't have it. None of Trump's appointees have the necessary required experience to do the job, regardless if they're outsiders or they're going to do Trump's bidding. And many of them, like in the case of the guy who is in charge of the environmental protection agencies, the agency is there to take out scumbags like Matt Gaetz, right? Matt Gaetz is certainly corrupt and, this kind of guy, right? Like, he's not a good person. And he's had ethics complaints of pedo nature, and I'm sure he has other things that he's done, like all the rest of these politicians. But it's like putting the fox in charge of the hen house, right? And a Trump loyalist. So it's like, kind of effed up. And it's driving the Democrats crazy, and I'll get to some of those clips next time, maybe next video, because I'm more talking about Trump in this one. But, there was another thing that happened here. I don't know if we have audio on this one, but McCarthy needed him to vote yes, and he voted present.
David Scott. Jeffries.
Oh, it's walking off the floor.
Kevin McCarthy walks off the.
He does not look happy.
Change.
Yeah. Somebody can change.
Kevin McCarthy walks off the floor.
No, he's talking.
I'm sorry, he walks up the floor, rather.
So this is Lauren Boebert. So these must be all the anti-Gaetz people here. Remember, she was part of that. I don't even think she has a job anymore. He's confronting him for, not voting for whatever it was.
Gaetz, he needed him to vote yes, not present.
He's trying to convince him.
He appears to be trying to convince Matt Gaetz to vote yes and not present.
Or Boebert.
Also, right, if he could get Lauren Boebert to change from present. Yes,
Or
one of the two of
convince.
them.
We haven't seen him doing this personally on the floor. He's obviously been doing it behind closed doors, but until.
Okay, so so this happened. Okay, so then it wasn't Matt Gaetz, it was a guy from Tennessee. Kevin McCarthy elbowed him, right, as he walked down the hall.
Speaker Republican Kevin McCarthy is facing an ethics complaint for allegedly shoving Republican Representative Tim Burchett of Tennessee. Now, it happened earlier this morning while Burchett was speaking with NPR. McCarthy allegedly elbowed him in the back and kept on walking. Burchett chased him down and called him a jerk, but McCarthy denies ever shoving him.
Did you elbow him?
Okay, no, I did not elbow him. No, I would not elbow him. I would not hit him in a kidney.
You felt it was on purpose and not an accident.
100% on purpose, man.
Okay, so this is the kind of petty shit and like immature behavior that's going on there, right? And Matt Gaetz is at the center of this stuff. And there's just something like, you know, scummy about the guy. I mean, on top of all the scummy people that exist in Washington, D.C. And because he's a Trump guy and Trump's Florida connection, you know, it's like he's bringing in his criminal family to rule over Washington, D.C. And like I said, you know, Trump will take actions, and some of those might be good. Like I said in the beginning, I agree with that one action. I'm sure I'm going to agree with other ones, and I'll point those out. And other ones are going to be possibly dangerous and disastrous. And we'll see how it plays out. Like I said in my other video, we don't know yet. It'll be kind of fun, and the Democrats will be provoked until Trump does something to fuck everybody, right? And then it won't be funny. But at the beginning, it'll be funny.
Get a position. It didn't happen. Why do you believe he's going to give you a real position, and what do you know of what that position might be?
We're not talking about a particular position for me in the government. What the agreement was about, what our agreement about it is about a unity party, about unifying our party over certain objectives, and this will allow me to continue to disagree with President Trump on issues that I don't agree with him on, and him to disagree with me. The issues that we agreed on were ending the war, ending the censorship and the surveillance state, and ending this war on our children, the chronic disease epidemic, which has now disabled about 60% of American children.
So, you know, those would be good things. Those three things, right? I don't know which war he wants to end, but both of them, it would be good if they ended both of those wars. The Ukraine war or the Gaza Strip war. I don't think they're going to end the Gaza Strip unless Israel has all of that property. They're going to get all that land, and Trump's going to give it to them. But in terms of censorship, they both agree on that, and, you know, that benefits all of us. If Trump doesn't start censoring people that disagree with him. You know, Trump might send some censorship, but what if Trump is pushing for people to, using the same policies as Joe Biden to stop people who criticize him, right? Like he's that kind of a weak piece of shit that he could do that, right? But the food problem, my wife sent me this. This is specific baby formula, and it has these, you know, again, I don't have the proof that this is baby formula, but it has 42% corn syrup solids, which is one of the worst things. Soy protein, I mean, some of these things, right? Sodium chloride, like all this stuff, potassium citrate, these are, you know, all these preservatives. There's way too many ingredients, and for a baby, and things like thiamine, these, you know, some of these supplements they're putting in here are not necessarily bad things, but the baby doesn't need to be having them like right off the bat. Like it's got vitamin D, sure, but does a baby need that like right off the bat? Like supplements. Like, of course, there'd be vitamin D in real mother's milk, so there's that. But anyways, you know, there's just this kind of problem. Like you can't be giving babies 42% corn syrup, which is one of the worst sugars. Okay, so then this happened.
President-elect Donald Trump has offered Robert F. Kennedy the role of Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Just the way she said that, right? This is the worst one. And so he's not getting passed through because so many of these, it's not just media that's beholden to Big Pharma, but Big Pharma owns all these politicians, which we know, right? In fact, Kennedy was going to work for Trump before, and Pfizer gave Trump $1 million, and then Kennedy didn't do it. And so I don't know how, people talk about Trump being a criminal mastermind, and I just don't see it. Like they say, he's a dunce and also a criminal mastermind. I can't be both. But, in all that, I don't know how much this is strategy, but clearly they can't deny him all these guys. It's a Republican Senate and all these, the way this goes, they can't deny him all of his people. They can deny him one or two, right? The Republican-led Senate. And they're going to deny him Kennedy because the Republicans are beholden to Big Pharma as much or as more than the Democrats even. And so, this is kind of a brilliant strategic move also because they've been talking about all his bad appointments, and Trump has just gone in there and he's throwing all sort of what people think about it or how it looks away. Usually people are concerned about how something might look or whatever, but Trump just doesn't care about that. And so he's appointing these people, and now with RFK Jr. coming in, all the attention away from these other people, the Tulsi Gabbards and the, all these people that are on the fringe or who are not liked by the media are taking a back seat to him talking about RFK Jr., right? So it's kind of like the best one because he was doing 2 a day, and Matt Gaetz was bad, like probably he was the worst one for Attorney General, and then all of a sudden he appoints this guy. You can tell just the way, let's do that again, just the way she says it, the tone in her voice.
President-elect Donald Trump has offered Robert F. Kennedy the role of Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Like I said, they should have like these dildos like right here and here with the words Pfizer in them. Just, or, a brand right here with, just so they know that these people are sponsored by Big Pharma.
Of Health and Human Services.
Let's go live to CNN's Kristen Holmes, who's in West Palm Beach for us near Mar-a-Lago. Kristen, clearly a controversial set of picks for Donald Trump in recent days, and now RFK Jr. tapped.
Look, the smile.
To be the Secretary of Health and Human Services, despite his track record of peddling conspiracy theories.
Peddling conspiracy theories. They're going to say that a lot. I got also Jake Tapper, who was directly after. This was the end of this morning show. And then I was watching Jake Tapper, and I taped a little bit of that. But peddling conspiracy theories, like that's the worst thing you can do. When these guys lie to you constantly, and they have power to make their lies legitimate. Conspiracy theories are things that they can label as lame. They can label as disinformation. And they can, spin it any way they want because they control the official story. The people who control it. But people aren't buying into that shit anymore. The official story no longer has any weight. Your authority no longer has any weight because the difference is who do you look to as an authority? In a sea full of liars and a sea full of disinformation, who do you see as somebody who's at least authentic in their presentation of the information, right? It's not these guys, and not for people who are young, right? For some older people and some, sheeple, but not people who really matter, right? Like the people that matter least. But they're, already spinning this thing, and they should say, well, we get a lot of our money from Big Pharma, and this appointment's bad for Big Pharma, full disclosure. That's what they should say, right? If they were going to be honest, if they weren't putting out disinformation, they would say that.
That's right, Boris and Brianna. And I am told from a source...
Brianna, her name's Brianna.
close to the situation.
Boris and Brianna.
And that RFK Jr. is expected to accept this position as we see this cabinet unfolding.
Okay, so this ended up happening, which we saw. I don't know, let's get into...
Donald Trump offering this very big...
So they go into this thing and how it worked out.
Get confirmed. One of the things to keep in mind here as we talk about this, RFK is not a Republican. He has been a Democrat. He has been an independent.
Okay, we know that, right? So let's see what he says here.
It is surprising to a number of people. I'm starting to get texts here from individuals who say that they had been speculating, they had heard rumors.
Okay, so he doesn't say anything. Let's get into this expert here. What are you going to have to say about this?
Dr. Jonathan Reiner, what do you think of this news? RFK Jr., the pick.
So Dr. Jonathan Reiner, how much are you owned by Big Pharma? How much does Big Pharma own you and the whole medical system? Because you are a doctor, right?
For Health and Human Services Secretary.
The guy's expression here, Boris.
Well, it seems
Boris is new.
to be that he fits with the pattern that we've seen this week, which is the hiring of people that are not just unqualified for a particular cabinet post, but unfit.
Unqualified and unfit.
As we've already, heard in this segment, Mr. Kennedy has already shown over the last 10 years his penchant for not just promoting unproven ideas,
Unproven, he leaned in on that. Unproven ideas.
Promoting disproven.
Disproven ideas. The ones that were disproven by our pharmaceutical shills, and they're faulty.
Ideas. He has loudly promoted conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theories. There's nothing worse than that. It's conspiracy theories, things that exist on the internet.
Such as the COVID virus being bioengineered to spare Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese. He's promoting.
So they're going to show that clip over and over again. So I'll show you when Jake Tapper shows the clip. I don't know if they're going to show it here. I'll see. Maybe they'll show it here. But Jake Tapper has it ready to go. And then I turned on to CNN last night, and they were showing that clip again. The clip where RFK Jr. is saying that it's biologically targeted against Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese. It prevents them from getting COVID. It's structured on their biological makeup, and it targets blacks and some other group. I forget what it is. We'll see it. So that because he said that, he was called. He had this. He was supposed to testify on censorship, and the Democrats just went after him about that. Remember that whole hearing about censorship, which is about how Joe Biden forced social media, which was, Joe Biden violated the First Amendment right by forcing social media to censor, stuff that ended up being true and hurting what would have hurt him, stuff about Hunter Biden and the rest, and also censoring RFK Jr., who was his political opponent. And so instead of, facing up to that and the media covering that because it was like real information, because Joe Biden actually did that, he went to these social media giants and he threatened them with Title 52 or whatever it is, which is, there's some provision these social media giants get for not being liable by the stuff that individual people post on their sites, and without that they can't run their sites. And he threatened to pull that if they didn't censor their stuff, right? Which they couldn't do that this election cycle. And now, that's going to be a big deal, the censorship stuff, because Trump was censored himself, and anything that happens to Trump he cares about. And so, this is, part of that stuff, right?
Voted the completely disproven concept that vaccines are connected to autism. He's been a loud, not just skeptic, but denier of the safety and efficacy of all vaccines.
This is the big thing, the big pharma stuff, right? Which we all know. And so they have to come out and say this because they are owned by big pharma. Again, whether it's true or not, you can't, there's no way to know anything they're saying. You can't believe anything they say because they're being sponsored. And they never are really critical of the pharmaceutical industry that's caused so much pain and suffering to people because their stuff makes people sick, right? The side effects are horrific on these things. And there's an easier way to, there's a prevention method against illness, which, eating properly is a part of it. And the food industry is a joke, right? Processed foods that make you sick. And then pharmaceutical drugs that make you sicker. And you end up having chronic illnesses because of these things, and then the environment as well. And so let's go to the Jake Tapper thing here.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Welcome to the lead. I'm Jake Tapper, and we begin with breaking news in our politics lead and the daily parade of controversial in-your-face names for President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet. According to two people close to this situation, President-elect Trump is on the verge of announcing Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the vaccine denier, as his next Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services.
Okay, you somber fuck. That's not even a real thing. Vaccine denier. Just see what he's done there is taken election denier and turned it into vaccine denier. He's not denying that vaccines exist, right? And he says that he's pro-vaccine. He just wants more old school science. He says the science isn't being done because of the profit margin or whatever else he says. But he's not certainly an anti-vaxxer like you would think about it. And so that's not accurate. And he knows them, which I'll get into in a bit. Like he did a joint thing with Kennedy. And so like this is silly. Like you're just making up terms now and derogatory terms to your audience of old people that you and your somber tie and your droopy dog face,
RFK Jr., a devout skeptic of childhood vaccines, endorsed Trump after suspending his own presidential campaign in August. He has been advising Trump's transition team. Here's just one of his many controversial comments, this one about COVID.
COVID-19 is targeted to attack Caucasians and black people. The people who are most immune are Ashkenazi Jews and Chinese. But we don't know whether it was deliberately targeted that or not.
Not true and stunningly quackery.
So when RFK Jr. talked about this, he said he had a study. Now, I'm not going to look through these studies because the studies themselves can be manipulated, and I'm not qualified to look through them. So I have to find my truth or my opinion in different ways, right? But neither is Jake Tapper. So they just come out with this, like, this is how they're approaching this. But again, they should have some sort of a mark on them that shows that they're getting funded by Big Pharma because they're compromised. Anybody would say that. If the majority of your advertiser money, if it's like even if it's 30%, is from Big Pharma, then you're this is a business, and your bosses aren't going to let you slam one of their advertisers. Like they're buying your silence, right? They're buying not even just your silence, they're buying your support. You're shilling for them. You're a shill for Big Pharma. And you should say that. Like that should be disclosed to your audience. Otherwise, you're like a worse piece of shit shill. Like if you say, in full disclosure, this suit was purchased by Pfizer, right? Like my somber tie was purchased by Pfizer.
This news about RFK Jr. comes as aftershocks have yet to die down over Trump's announcement that he wants now former Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida to be Attorney General. Let's get right with CNN anchor Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, what do we know about how Trump came to this decision about RFK Jr. that I feel is clearly going to upset the medical and scientific community, whether they're Trump supporters or Harris supporters?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, talk about tough confirmation battles, Jake. This is going to be an interesting one to watch, just even if it gets out of the committee, because that had been a major concern here. But I have been in Palm Beach ever since Trump won the election, Jake, basically day by day. And by being down there, none of this is a surprise that Trump is on the verge of announcing RFK Jr. as his pick for HHS Secretary.
Okay, so there's two things here. Either Trump is legitimately wanting RFK Jr. to be ahead of this, or he's looking for Pfizer money. He's looking for, this is something where he could get a huge, even like $1 billion, like something like that, to, allow this thing to die. Because Trump is pushing for recess appointments. And the only way RFK Jr. is getting appointed is through a recess appointment. I'd be shocked if he passed through Congress. And his hearings, like whatever they're going to do, is going to be so brutal. They're going to come after him in ways like he's the centerpiece. And so if Trump is using him or just throwing this out there knowing that there's no chance of confirmation, then it isn't a real thing. He assuages Joe Rogan and what did I do? I nominated him, but these guys turned on him and I couldn't do anything about it, right? And so, we'll see how this all plays out because how Trump, he's not passionate about things and he's not loyal to people. Trump thinks about himself, but if he gets passed through, we'll see. I would be shocked. The only way is like if there's a recess appointment and Trump just appoints him anyway without, he bypasses the Congress.
have grown quite close ever since RFK dropped out of the presidential race and endorsed Trump here. He's been hanging out at Mar-a-Lago. I saw him when I was in Palm Beach, a very tiny island. It was kind of teeming with all these people who are cabinet hopefuls. And now Donald Trump has offered him this job as the Health and Human Services Secretary, which is obviously a huge and encompassing job, Jake, and we saw just how important it is and how at the forefront it can be when the COVID-19 pandemic was happening. And what's happening behind the scenes here, Jake, is that RFK Jr. very clearly wanted a job in the federal government. And when I did an interview shortly before the election, maybe 10 days or so before, with one of the Trump transition co-chairs, Howard Lutnick, who is essentially in charge of all the personnel aspect of this, the other co-chair is in charge of the policy side, we asked him specifically about this because he had just sat down with RFK Jr. for about 2 hours. In that interview with me, he then repeated the very same vaccine conspiracies that we have heard RFK Jr. baselessly promote that are inaccurate. And in that interview, though, Jake, Howard Lutnick told me that RFK Jr. was not going to be getting the job at HHS. I followed up and confirmed.
Okay, so again, means nothing right now. It just, again, it provides cover for Trump and his other nominees, and it means that there's one, mulligan they have. They're going to get rid of somebody. The Republicans are going to say no to Trump on somebody, and the Democrats will on all of them. So there'll be that. We'll see how this goes through, right? But they can't deny him all these people, and these are his loyalists. And he's doing this he'll just appoint other loyalists, right? They're going to have to. These positions are going to have to be filled at some point, and Trump comes in with a majority. But I doubt we'll see RFK Jr. Being a part of any of these things because he himself thought he was just going to be an advisor because there's no way he's passing through. All of this will be interesting. This is, this is a lot more interesting than I thought it was going to be because Trump is he doesn't care what people think about it or what they're going to say, and he's actually kind of provoking these guys. Okay, so I was hoping to get Morning Joe. This is Morning Joe, but this is, I guess, Mika and Joe are in hiding or something. I don't know. Their take on Kennedy, because Kennedy's the worst one for them because of Big Pharma. But let's just say this, right? That we all know about the health of America, right? The health of America is undisputably bad, right? And so there were effects from the bloop. We all know that. Anybody who's looking into it at all realizes there's turbo cancer and these other things that are happening. So there's that. But what's something that, and that's harder for people. That people have to look for that information, right? Sure. Not everyone's going to get that. That's fine. But what people do know is you look around and half the kids are obese. Almost all Americans are overweight, and most Americans have chronic health issues. And our food, if you read the ingredients and you do any kind of research into it, which these guys all should because they are reporting on this, has things in there that cause cancer and heart disease. Like I say, I go to Walmart and I look, and there's people walking around, and it's usually like an obese family walking around with a cart full of heart disease and cancer. So we know that's what foods do. And we know that there are these side effects because every commercial that they play on these crappy shows, they have to list their side effects. And some of them horrific are like dying. Like sometimes some of these medication side effects are death. Might be a small percentage, but it's still there. And then the other things that it causes. And, the way that they go about this medical model is that it really works financially because it's a financially based medical model. It's big business. They make trillions of dollars. They can advertise because, advertisement, if you've watched Shark Tank, is it's called customer acquisition costs. How much does it cost you to acquire a customer? And if they can spend billions of dollars, that means that they're making trillions of dollars, right? Or they're making hundreds of billions of dollars. And so that's why they have so much money to spend, because they have so much money that they make. And they can acquire customers through this process because they're just, making all this money. And if they're spending on commercials, they're also purchasing politicians. And so if the health of America is so bad, and the other side says nothing, the Democrats say nothing about campaigning on improving the health, and the media say nothing about improving the health. So you have RFK Jr., who you may or may not trust, but at least he's talking about the legitimate problem, and Trump is backing him. And Trump has used this as a message, and it resonated with people. And it was like something that was hitting for RFK Jr. on the campaign trail because so many people are experiencing this, the after effects of this issue, right? And although Trump pushed out Operation Warp Speed, at least he's providing something, talking about the actual problem of the health and food epidemic. So they have no credibility because they're not talking about something that's so obviously a problem for everybody.
Most about that he thinks represents the deep state, DOJ, the intelligence services. You could argue the health because of how the pandemic was handled last time around, even the Department of Defense. But we should note there's a bunch of voices coming out against Kennedy's nomination. One notable one, maybe surprising one, the editorial board of the New York Post, which is out with a piece this morning with this headline: putting RFK Jr. in charge of health breaks the first rule of medicine.
Okay, so this is the New York Post, who's owned by Rupert Murdoch. Now, RFK Jr. used to go on, he was friends with Roger Ailes. They were roommates somewhere. They became friends. Roger Ailes was the guy in charge of Fox News. He kind of ended up being disgraced and Me Too'd and then died, at the end of his life. But Roger Ailes and him were good friends, and nobody would put this guy on, but Roger Ailes put him on, even though Fox News is so, he's really a liberal. Kennedy is a liberal Democrat, and he would go on Fox News, which he still does because they're interested in some of the things he's saying because the right is starting to embrace some of these narratives. But they were going to put some stuff out, some of the things that he found, some things he was going to talk about Big Pharma, and Roger Ailes says, I just can't do it. And I was told by Rupert Murdoch I can't do it because they're sponsoring us, right? Like this was Kennedy's story when he was going on Joe Rogan and these other places. Like Fox News was being at least allowing him to talk, but they wouldn't allow him to talk about this Big Pharma stuff. And they were going to. They was going to do a couple of shows, and he did something with Jake Tapper, and Jake Tapper agreed with it. Now I'm going to show you Jake Tapper in a bit, or I just showed you Jake Tapper, the way that this is lining up. And Jake Tapper was a part of that, right? So, that Jake Tapper and him did this piece, and then it was for CBS or something before Jake Tapper worked for CNN, and they killed it. ABC News, I think, right? They killed it. And so, this is something where they're admitting that Big Pharma does all these things. And so the New York Post is owned by somebody who gets sponsored by Big Pharma. So this isn't a shocker. They were, they'll always be against things that hurt their interests.
The board writes...
And they don't like him. And the New York Post has a thing about him. They've done so many hit pieces on him. So it's not a shocker at all. I've seen all these hit pieces about him and his affairs and these things. The New York Post really dislikes RFK Jr.
In part this. The overriding rule of medicine is, first, do no harm.
So then there would be there wouldn't be 250 million deaths attributed to medical errors then, right? Like if the medicine was doing great. It's the third largest killer in America. Even now with, it kills more people than COVID. When, of course, COVID's a part of that, their medical treatment of it.
Certain installing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to head Health and Human Services breaks this rule.
Okay, so then there's this piece here with this woman. Here.
Again, it's just putting forward this misinformation. By the way, Sam, I was one of those people that discredited the idea of him getting a cabinet position because I thought managing 11 agencies like Medicare, Medicaid, NIH, FDA, that's hard work. And it didn't strike me that RK Jr. wanted to do hard work. So put me in that category of shocked and surprised that he got that pick. Because
I've gone forward here. She said something here.
Stage lung cancer, it was essentially a death sentence. Now we have incredible monoclonal antibodies, incredible treatments. Now we have genetic therapies. We have sickle cell disease, cystic fibrosis, retinoblastoma. The list goes on of things that we can do. That was American research and drug discovery and innovation that we have made widely available in the globe. We can talk about.
See, if you change what people were eating and the conditions in the environment, and you did realistic research, or you showed the research on what Wi-Fi and things do to people, and you got rid of all these side effects that you get from these medications. You take the poison out of the diet, and you take the poison out of the pharmaceutical industry. People would be generally healthy like they used to, and they wouldn't have these prolonged lives of suffering, being chronically ill and forever patients, forever customers of this medical industry, right? Which you guys are all ahead of. And so you have no credibility about any of these things because you're not a healer. There's a difference between being a doctor and a healer. So I have a long narration about character development at the end of this thing. And this is going to be a long video. And I just looked at it, and 3 things came up that I'm going to cover next time. I'm going to go more into the Alex Jones thing. But there's a movie called The Amateur. You know, I have this Year of the Amateur. And it's interesting. It involves the CIA. I looked a little bit at the trailer. And there's another CNN thing, how swing voters think about Trump, Elon Musk, and RFK Jr. Which, of course, we know what that's going to be, because swing voters. Well, I'll get into that when we cover that next time. And then Laura Boebert, or Amy Boebert, or Laura something, Boebert, whatever her first name is, asked witnesses in the DOD is creating hybrids of human and non-human genetics, and that's kind of interesting. And those things were just recommended to me as I'm getting done with this video, right? Like, it just keeps on coming in. And so, you know, this thing is an absolute, joke. Let me show you the Alex Jones piece here, and then I have a video, like a movie, in which a kid writes to Satan. It's like a kid's comedy movie instead of Santa. And Satan answers him, and then tries to take his soul, because that's what Satan does, at least in these movies. And so, all of these things. Okay, so I got some tabs open for my next video. I just, it's interesting that this happened at the same time, because mainstream media is linking Alex Jones to RFK Jr. and all of us, and, this whole thing. And it's just a huge mistake on their part, because it just, solidifies or crystallizes a bigger group, right? Like I said, we have all our differences, but anybody who doesn't believe in the official story, and now it becomes us versus them. And there's a lot more of us, right? And us is activated in some way, right? And has, is dynamic and, is, depending on, there's levels of everything. But people who are, in their ability to manifest things, and who are, becoming something, they're changing and adapting, and they're being affected by the truth. And even though Alex Jones is a shill, that doesn't, they're linking all this stuff together, and it's a mistake for them to do that. But anyways, this is Alex Jones finding out his...
Ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, so I'm not going to show you. This is from the New York Post, and they put a video up on YouTube, and I found a number of other videos that weren't the original one, and they all end here. It just sort of cuts off at the end. And then so I said, well, I want to hear what else he had to say. And he's just promoting his new stuff, but they cut that off, which shows you, here's the last part of it here.
So they changed all the bidding rules, made it secret 2 days ago. I had a bad feeling. I told you that.
You had a bad feeling. Okay, so this is Alex Jones' Twitter feed, and they've edited out this judge everywhere else. And they've edited out the end of it, right? Give the guys, he's losing his whole thing. It's a shill, and this is all fake. But he's losing his thing, and you guys can't just play his whole fucking video, right? All that hard.
I just got word 15 minutes ago that my lawyers and folks met with the U.S. trustee over our bankruptcy this morning, and they said they're shutting us down, even without a court order. This morning, the Connecticut Democrats with the Onion newspaper bought us. They asked, did they outbid? They said, well, it was competitive. So they changed all the bidding rules, made it secret 2 days ago. I had a bad feeling. I told you that. And just like they tried to shut us down back in late May without a court order, they're supposed to have a court order. There's going to be injunctions filed. I'm about to go live out of Harrison's American Journal studio. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to be here until they come in here and turn the lights off. I'm going to say, where's your court order? So this is all going down right now. They want to silence the American people, but we're not going to be silenced. Be sure and follow me at the Alex Jones Network at AJN Live.
Boom. How long before they take that from you?
On X right now. They're filing court to take real Alex.
So they cut that part off. This video, they cut the last part off, right?
Jones away. That's totally unconstitutional. The judge already said no, so they filed in other courts. I just got...
Okay, so I'll do some kind of Alex Jones. He has a bunch of stuff on Twitter. I'll go through it tomorrow. I have this long voiceover to get to here. But I had a story I want to talk about. It's first of all, let's say how funny it is that the Youngin bought InfoWars, so that's great. Like, I think they're making fun of it. I have a bunch of videos to look at. People react to mainstream media and Alex Jones's stuff on Twitter. But we'll come back to that tomorrow and whatever. This video is probably going to be up. Today's Friday, so it'll probably be up Saturday. I mean, I'm going to try to post things like every day, although I think it's just going to be overwhelm people with content, so we'll see. Anyways, I'll tell my story next time in my next video. It's about going to Costco. I have one more thing to get to here. It's this Santa Claus Satan movie, and then the long voiceover. So this happened.
Every Christmas, something magical happens.
Dear Santa.
When a kid sends a letter to Santa, but Liam...
To Santa.
Okay, so he misspells Santa and sends it to Satan. Which is, in an odd way, a kind of interesting premise for a movie. Because Santa and Satan, I've showed you all these, the Satan Claus. I mean, Santa is an anagram for Satan. He wears a red suit and breaks into your house, and he's kind of creepy and all these things, right? But we have this figure and this lie that everyone has. There's Santa truthers out there because, why do we lie to our kids about things like this? I mean, it's a straight up lie. Because when you find out, and sometimes kids get pissed off when they find out they've been lied to, right? Like, do you still believe in Santa kind of thing? The Santa truthers. And so this other part about being an anagram for Satan is interesting as well. But this movie is like for kids, right?
Is a crappy speller.
I don't know if I can use all this, so I probably can use some of it, and then if I can't, I'll just have to edit it out later. But and I'll tell you what happens here. So he wants the kid's soul. He's gonna give him 3 wishes. And then he gets the kid's soul because, that's appropriate for a kid's movie.
This looks like fun.
It's Jack Black.
Oh, that's putrid.
Thank you.
What do you want?
You summoned me.
Not what I expected.
What'd you expect?
In the movies, the reindeer usually have the antlers, not you.
Kid, are you high?
I'm ready for this.
Boom. From the minds that brought you Dumb and Dumber.
You lucked out big time. I'm way better than Santa. Ho, ho, frickin' ho. You, my friend, are getting 3 wishes.
You mean like a genie?
They stole that from me.
Boom, they stole that thing from the devil.
Way, after you make your wishes, I'm taking your soul.
What?
You ain't never had a friend like me. Okay, that I may have stolen from Aladdin. Now we're even.
Okay, so is this for kids or... It's kind of seems for kids. The jokes suck. Jack Black is, annoying, and he's gotten more annoying. Remember, he dressed up as a heavy metal rocker, and he got all the audience to hold up their devil's horns. Remember, I've showed you that before. Let me show you that here as we go through this.
Who wants to pray to the devil with me? Who's in with me? Come on, hey. Let me see those horns. Let me see those horns. Metal. Metal.
So you got the audience to start throwing up the devil's horns.
Metal. And to the person next to you. Come on, lady. Dear Dark Lord Satan, hope everything's good with you. I'm doing fine myself.
So then he says a prayer to Satan, right? So, this is the first time he said. Then, of course, he did that rock and roll spoof movie. And that involved a lot of devil worshipping satanic stuff, right? If there was a bit, you do it one time, right? If you do it 3 times, you're like a devil worshiper.
Let me show you a few of the things I could do for you.
Gets the kid to go throw craps.
I'll be right back.
It's Post Malone.
Leo!
He's got Post Malone. He's up there dancing with Post Malone.
Look, I'm worried Santa's going to trick me into getting my soul.
I think he's just confused.
We believe you.
No.
It's crazy because the devil's trying to get his soul and his parents won't believe him.
Yo, down here! What are you waiting for? Go make a move! Sue me, I'm thirsty.
That's very funny. Good jokes.
I tried everything. That kid's incorruptible.
What about doing something out of kindness?
I don't even know what you just said. I mean, I know all the words, but I just never heard them in that order.
Boom. The devil, like, he just doesn't know about being kind.
You know this man?
I'm his uncle. Beat it.
Who do you think you are?
Well, who do you think you are? He's going to do some bad stuff to this guy.
Talking to me like that.
That doesn't sound right.
Pardon me, kombucha.
He's going to make him have diarrhea. That's the kind of powers the devil has. He can just, twinkle his fingers and make you have diarrhea.
Watch this.
No, please. Never trust a thought. You just gambled and lost.
Nice to meet you. The pleasure was mine.
Boom. It's just so funny. Just what an incredible movie. There's Satan. Santa. Same thing. So we have that going for us. Okay. Talking a little bit more about character development here. So the Sajmark system, Babaji had said years and years ago that the spiritual development was on the master and the character development was 100% on the Abhyasi. And what he meant by that, or at least my interpretation of it, and it was explained a lot by Charji, also certainly in these preceptor books, was that the way that you would go through your yatra and your spiritual points and your levels of spiritual development, you had access now to divine, I don't want to say powers, but your abilities and insights and a higher level of consciousness. And it was your responsibility to change in the kind of person that could use those things wisely. So I'm going to put this on the end of my next regular video because it's important. And then, of course, in my Journey Series 163, which will probably be out maybe even faster. I don't know, because I'm cranking through a lot of content now because the weather's, it's winter time and I'm just here more. And so, we'll see. But anyways, as you move through the higher levels of consciousness, you had to make yourself into a person, character-wise, qualities-wise, that would be able to sustain that level of spiritual development, which has always been a problem with human beings. And that couldn't be done for you. That had to be just your own choice, because it's all based in choice. The kind of character you have, the kind of person you are, is based in choice. So just in terms of the people who are going to be listening to my normal videos, I received these preceptor books that I had before. And I lost them basically in the divorce to the extent that I never got them back, kind of thing, right? And I didn't care much about it because I wasn't going to do preceptor work, but then the whole thing happened with this guy Daji crapping out and me doing gratefulness meditation. And I knew that I needed to reread these things to really embrace, doing preceptor work again. And so that's, for the people who are listening to this at the end of the video. And I'll talk a little bit more. I'll explain some things that I wouldn't probably explain if it was just Journey Series stuff, because it's stuff that I cover in the Journey Series. But in these books, it has these preceptor books. It focuses on the preceptors developing good character, which is the responsibility of what's called the Abhyasi, or the aspirant. Everybody who does Sajmark, you have to work on your character. It's said in various places. And, I've been thinking about it, and I was thinking about last night, that it's difficult to do that when you form your primary years as a person and you develop bad character qualities from your parents and the environment. Certainly here in America, there's no stress on having a good character. In fact, you're rewarded for not having one. If you have a bad character, you're willing to screw people over and lie and cheat and steal, be a sociopath or a narcissist, you're rewarded for that. And so, pretty much every society around the world in one way or another people who have bad characters rise to the top, at least on the material world. There's so little focus on your spiritual development, and you just don't get it. Like, you know, you might get it in religions, but you see people in religion who just suck all the time too, right? So even people who are very religious, they don't really work on their character. A lot of it's just superficial shit that people post on social media. So, you know, holier than thou, sanctimonious stuff that people post about other people's character. But very few people were working on their own characters, right? Because it's just not a part of what we do as a culture. So look, everyone can get a little bit of a pass because of that, right? And because it's hard to rework things that are your fundamental building blocks in your personality that you get. Like so many things in your formative years, you know, you learn to walk, talk, eat, crawl. You know, my wife just sent me this chart of babies' milestones, and they left off, I think, crawling. I have to go look it up again, and I meant to show it in a video, but if I still have it here. She sent me an email some time ago. But they left off all these things and milestones, right? And so here it is. I have the PDF here. And I made a joke about something here to her. Here's the thing. Crawling was removed as a developmental milestone. Walking alone was moved from 12 months to 15 months. Rolling was moved from 4 months to 6 months. First word was moved from 12 months to 15 months. 2-year-olds are now expected to only use 2 words together rather than full sentences or something. It cuts off right there. So the developmental milestones have been moved back, right? That babies aren't getting them for whatever reason. Could have something to do with the, you know what, the bloop that, you know, parents got and kids. But either way, let's get back to the important part here. The milestones, you know, so much of your development as a person, your brain development and your things that you're going to do the rest of your life, you do in your first 3 to 5 years. And then, of course, you know, even as a kid, so much of your development. And by the time you're 18 or so, your brain stops growing. And you're, you know, that kind of development. And there's just a lot of, you know, movement and development into being a human being, a lot of growth on every level in your character and your character qualities. And it's hard to reverse all those things, your tendencies. And then, of course, you bring in some scars from past existences. And so there's all that, right? But, you know, I was thinking that you can at least not do, when you become a spiritual person, specifically big stuff, you know, like this guy Dodgy, this clown Dodgy, and his family being charged by the SEC for doing fraudulent behavior that resulted in scamming 170 million out of investor money, right? Like, that's something you could avoid. Like, you know, I mean, especially if you're supposed to be a spiritual master. You know, big time scams, criminal behavior, cheating, things like this, right? You know, whatever it might be that would be, you know, destroying something, like destroying your marriage if you were cheating or something, you know, within your marriage, like big things that would be unforgivable, right? Things like that. Deceiving people, scamming them, and all those kind of things, right? And so the big things, pretty much everyone could not do. Like, those are things that take premeditation and planning. But then I was thinking that, you know, in the character development sections of the Sajmark training and training people to develop their characters, Babaji, the second master of the system, said that the bad thing about lying is when you lie to yourself. That lying in general is whatever it is. Like, it's not, you know, horrible. He didn't say it was something that you should never do. He said, but don't lie to yourself. And so I was thinking about this morning because I know Babaji told, I think, at least one lie. And that was that his spiritual master, Lalaji, died. And he said that he had a lot of writings that was about, you know, all these kind of essays he did, you know, back in the ancient, you know, the late 1800s, early 1900s in India, where he had papers and he would write on these papers, and they were a pile of them. And he put his hand like about, you know, 20 inches, like a pile of papers like that. And back then, you know, they used paper for whatever, you know, like it was a rarity for people to have. So they had somebody there, a maid or somebody who sold all the papers for waste products or whatever, so it could be used, whatever, people would use extra paper for there. And, that was the story. But it came out later that his family had all of his writings, and Babaji didn't want to throw shade on the family. He didn't want, people getting mad at the family. Eventually, the family members, a few of them came back and are doing the meditation now. They've come back into the organization, but I don't know what they're doing now with Heartfulness, but they were doing it towards the end of the third master's life, right? So there's that. So this idea that he was lying to protect the family. He made up a story. And so that would be the case of, lying or doing something we're not telling the truth is, and I don't know, personally, it's, sometimes you don't say anything at all, but lying, I think, is always an issue, right? Just in terms of your own peace of mind, when people know they're lying. But I thought about this other piece where he said, just don't believe your own lies. And that's pretty much everything. The rationalization, because if people give themselves permission to do bad shit because they believe their own lies. They believe that they're victims. They believe that they're, they've been wrong somehow and they deserve to wrong other people, that the victim consciousness, and that all comes from lying to yourself, right? Like if you believe that everything that you receive is coming from God, that there's no accidents, it's all part of some sort of a plan, then you've done something in the past that has made whatever you're experiencing right now as a, as a consequence. And it could be a good consequence. It could be something that you need to evolve. It could be something that's helping you move forward. And it always is to some extent, whether it's like a consequence for bad behavior in the past or just something you need to undergo to develop character and be a better person, right? It's a test. That this idea that there's faith, which I was talking about earlier in the Journey series, that, with God, there has to be faith. Like there's things that you'll never be able to prove, that'll never be tangible. It's some things to do with spiritual life, all of it to some extent. And then, some of it even more intensely has to do with faith, a leap of faith. You're never going to have the kind of concrete confirmation that there even is a God. It's always going to be subtle. You're always going to have faith in things that are in the etheric world, because they're not material things. They're not material facts. They're not scientifically proven. There's nothing like that. They're not heavy. They're very subtle, and things that are subtle are less, they're subtle, so they're never going to be slap you in the face kind of things, right? It's the same thing for past lives and things. You're never going to get the kind of tangible proof, but there's little bits of pieces of things that are familiar, people that are familiar, things that deja vu type things like that. Well, that's a little different than past lives, but, all those types of things, right? They're very subtle. And so there's a leap of faith, as I was saying earlier in my last voiceover in the Journey series. And so with all that, I was thinking about lying to yourself. And once you stop lying to yourself, then you pretty much stop lying, right? Like if you lie then, lying can make things better for you materially. Lying can be something that, it has immediate positive effects of relieving you of, responsibility or deflecting or, any number of things when you're a kid, right? Not getting in trouble, right? Not receiving the consequences for something you did wrong, blaming it on somebody else. But, ultimately the guilt and shame and the negative things that you get from it, and then, deceiving yourself and excusing your lies because you start believing them is the issue, right? Because if you stop lying to yourself, then really there's not much need to lie to other people, because, what you're trying to do most of the time when you're lying is cover up for the piece of shit that you are, right? Like that you're a piece of shit, that you're doing bad things. Like that's why there's people out there that are just hedonistic, and probably you've known somebody like this, that just embraces their lower nature and they're not ashamed of it. And they're not great people, but they're kind of great people because they're fun to be around, because they're not hiding anything. They're not pretending to be anything that they're not, right? That's, some of why people gravitate to Donald Trump to some extent, right? And that there's people out there who are just, in a sense, they've embraced their lower tendencies, and they're not trying to hide them from other people. And they're usually fun-loving, whatever. I'm not talking about people who are just like evil and sinister, but they're people who are, partiers, and they're not ashamed or embarrassed of their lower nature, and it's kind of refreshing when you meet people like that. Like there's, can wear on you. It's not. It's not somebody that you spend a lot of time with, but you're like, oh, this person's, not ashamed of stuff, right? And so, most of the things you see, like on social media when people post stuff, is they're creating a persona that's not them, and they're hiding from themselves probably more than anybody else, but certainly everybody else, their bad thoughts. You see people who are in church or in some religious thing, and they're gossiping, and they're nasty people, and they have bad thoughts about other people, but they cover it up with like being nice on the outside, right? They're fakely nice, and all these things. But if you're not lying to yourself, then you're not, you're just accepting who you are. Then when people know who you are, then you're like, yeah, I do that, right? Like, you're not worried about people exposing you as a fraud because you're not, lying to yourself. You've accepted yourself. And that's one of the great things about meditation. And that if you do it correctly, you see, the thoughts that you have that are negative, right? You might not act on those thoughts. Like I said, you can restrain yourself and at least not act on those thoughts. But if you have, thoughts of, where you're manipulating people, or you're, or just wishing bad things on people, or just all these things, right? And you're, pretending to be something else on the outside to them, so they don't really know you. And then you're fearful when they really get to know you, they're not going to like you. All these people, your significant others, and so nobody really knows you because you're constantly deceiving yourself and them. And so that's where like the fucked up stuff starts to happen, because you've created these, this gap between who you are in reality and who you need to present on a daily basis. And all your energy goes into creating these illusions about who you are. So, in terms of my personal life and my own character development, it's something that I've been aware of, like just being honest about things, like just character issues, and not getting stressed about them. Whatever it is, like, selfishness, thoughts of selfishness, whatever. Selfish thoughts. I don't engage in like outwardly wrong behavior, like something that's, deception, or, like people who watch my videos kind of know what I'm talking about here. Like in terms of my service to God and other people, I'm not 100% all in, right? Like I'm not, going to overextend myself to people that are going to stab me in the back. And, God is God, but, it's just, I've seen what happens, and I'm willing to do this work here. And, whatever else I can do in my, free time, the preceptor stuff that's done on a subtle level. And, I pray for people every 9 p.m., pretty much everyone, unless we miss the time, about, everyone in the world coming to a spiritual state. So I participate in the betterment of the collective humanity, a little bit. I dabble in it. And maybe as I get older, I will, do more. But I'm not, I'm not against it. I'm just not all enthusiastic about it, right? But what I don't do is I don't lie to myself and say, oh, wow, you're doing so much, and you're such a good person, and you know what I mean? Like, I don't like embellish or make it more than it is, right? When people say, wow, you've really helped me and something in the videos, and, being a conduit for this energy and this information is, something. I'm not, it's something. I'm doing something, making, at least to that extent, it's self-contributing to make the world a better place. But, I'm not, it's not like I'm inconveniencing myself, right? It's not like I'm doing something really hard here. I'm sitting here with my 2 dogs in bed in my pajamas and talking. It's not like I'm putting myself out, like I'm not suffering on your behalf, right? And so, I don't lie about it. I don't embellish it. I don't, make it more than it is. I understand what has been done in the past by other people in terms of their commitment and energy, and how it was done by the masters in the Sizemore system, where every thought they have, every action, everything that they did is, to help with this process and do God's work, and that's great. And maybe I'll aspire to be something like that someday. That'll be, I'm not opposed to that, right? But the one thing I can say about it, what I'm trying to get to here, is that when you stop lying to yourself, then you can work on your character if you choose to do that. I mean, you will eventually do that. I mean, to some extent, more and more as you get older, because it's the lying to yourself that is the problem. Like, the lying to yourself has created the character issues in the first place. It's really the thing that people have to stop doing, is lying to themselves, right? Like, all the Trumpers, for my regular viewers, all the liberals who hate Trump, right? People who have TDS on either side, who are lying about Trump so that they can feel like somebody else is going to save them. They don't have to work on their characters. They don't have worked on themselves, because it's the liberals in the deep state that are preventing them from, moving forward, right? It's the same thing with vegans who think, well, I'm not eating animals, so I'm better than these animal eating piece of shit over there. Like, every, belief system comes with a lot of self-deception. All the various groups of people that are believing in one thing or another to stop them from actually taking responsibility. And it's always like, we're the good guys and you're the bad guys, right? And I mean, a big part of this is, like, for me, in terms of the Journey series and what I was saying earlier in the last voiceover. This guy, Daji, the guy who took over the presidency of the Sri Ramchandra mission and then turned it into this cult-like thing. Like, it's not a successful cult, like a cult failure called Heartfulness, and there's just stupidity and just bad behavior and horrible character development. And he was privileged to higher levels of spiritual attainment and training and information, and he was into it. Like, he was a good Abhyasi and preceptor, a good practitioner of the system. But, somewhere along the line, he, and this happens to spiritual people. It's a real problem. It has happened to pretty much every saint, famous saints. They rises to a high level, but because their character isn't developed sufficiently enough, the power and the level of consciousness that they now have, they abuse it, right? They abuse it. They start doing things for themselves and not God, right? They start misusing these things that they've been given to help humanity for their own benefit. And, happened with Jesus to some extent, and other people, right, that are less famous. There's all these good spiritual organizations that started off with somebody having some abilities, right? Even that guy David Koresh in Waco, if the movie is to be believed, there was a mini-series about this, two of them. The first one was about David Koresh and his people in Waco. And if it was to be believed, the guy had something, like some kind of spiritual connection to God. But then he started to misuse it, right? Where he was the only one having sex with the women. He impregnated, 8 or 9 different women, right? Other guys' wives, they weren't allowed to have sex. But David Koresh impregnated the wives for, like this weird shit like that, right? Like, stuff that's self-serving or just twisted and, these things. Because he was, supposed to be this higher developed person in his mind. But he did have something, right? He had some stuff, some biblical stuff. But he was, crediting himself with this idea that he was going to open the 7th scroll or something. And, the Bible stuff it's pretty lame. I mean, it's okay for a religion, but it's not good for spirituality. It's not good for something that's where you're connecting to God directly, which David Koresh was to some extent. But his character flaws and some of the other things that he had precluded or prevented him from, becoming the person that he could have been, right? And that's what happens. Like, people rise up to higher levels. It happens on political basis and in business, where you have these samskaras, and you could be a great person, and these samskaras are hidden, these past patterns of behavior. But then you rise up to a higher level of influence, and you have powers, And then this, demonic stuff comes out, this selfish stuff, criminal stuff comes out, right? And that's what's happened with Dodgy to whatever, extent. And, he's clearly lying to himself in a way that's embarrassing and can easily be seen by pretty much anybody. But the people around him, they all read the same books that I'm reading, like these people who are preceptors and understand about character development, these things, right? And they know about self-deception. I mean, it's there, it's talked about it, it's there. And they know about it, right? And yet they're deceiving themselves for somebody who so obviously has failed, whatever reason, just like the Trumpers are deceiving themselves, right? And this is where, the world is coming apart because people, just because they want to believe something that isn't true. The truth is painful, like it's fucking painful. I mean, that's the reality of truth, right? If we weren't liars, if we weren't lying all the time, and we weren't creating our own illusionary worlds and our inner worlds where we're having to lie to ourselves just to get through the day because the truth is just too fucking painful. I mean, that's the problem with humanity. Like, people can't face the truth, and you tell them the truth, and they melt down, right? Like, how many times have you seen somebody be told the truth about themselves that they know to be true, that deep down they know to be true, and, they just, or just the ways that people will, you've had situations in your life, and certainly people in the truth community, spiritual people, that the truth about somebody. And you kind of feel like it's your responsibility to tell them in some way. But the person sets up so many roadblocks and constructs so many rules of social engagement in your interactions with them to prevent you from telling them the truth, right? They let you know if that you tell them the truth, they're going to attack you and they're going to, whatever it might be, right? I mean, maybe not physically, but certainly physically, but verbally or any kind of way, right? They'll find ways to punish you for telling them the truth. I mean, our whole society does that. We have that. I mean, there's so much censorship out there. And, some of the truths are warped, but like any truth, there's so much in our system that is, the truth will destroy the system, like the debt-based economic system, some of these other things. And so, this all comes from lying to yourself. If you just accept your shortcomings and be realistic about them, and they're not the end of the world. You're not a, worthless piece of shit if you're living in this world the way it is. You have your shortcomings. We all do. But just realizing what they are and accepting them to whatever extent, and just saying, all right, I'm not going to indulge in them. Like, don't make them okay. Like, you're not making your shortcomings okay. But you're living with the fact that you're a flawed human being, working to be better, and you're being as better as much as you can, right? Like, it's a little bit better each day, right? But you're not lying to yourself. And I think the part for me that has to do with the personal collapse of the Sagemark system, I was really surprised by all these people who, are supposed to be developing good characters and working on self-deception are completely folding and agreeing with something they know. There's this Brighter Minds thing where kids are supposed to smell colors and all this bullshit. It's so weird. And there's these assholes in the audience patting their heads and rubbing their bellies, even though, they're doing the exercises that are supposed to help kids under 15 develop these special powers, these superpowers, where they now can smell they can see with their sense of smell, and they can see, optically with their sense of hearing, and it's a scam that's been around India for a while. And they're out there patting themselves in the head and rubbing their bellies, even though it doesn't do anything for them. And they all know it's bullshit, right? Like, it's just, I was watching the video, I'm like, I can't believe you guys are just folding and just going along with this, right? But they're doing it because they don't want to confront the truth that the system that they have put so much into has collapsed, right? The organization. And that's pretty much everybody. Like, if everyone faced the truth of our circumstances, like people's distractions and addictions and little pleasures and things that they live for are just there to prevent them from facing the truth about themselves and our current situation. Because the truth is painful, right? And then, as the system collapses, and everyone's like, feels like a victim. Well, where'd this come from? Well, you knew it was coming. You knew there'd been a collapse. You saw the people around you. You saw yourself, right? And it's just, all this superficial shit you post on social media to pretend you have a life that's better than it really is, right? And so it's like the self-deception that's crushing humanity. And like each person has to look at that themselves, because it's not about fixing other people. Who gives a shit about other people? Like in reality, you can't control their bad choices. You can't control their good choices, right? Well, you can control yours, right? You can minimize your own. You can maximize the honest, good parts of your character and develop and work towards connecting to God. Which anybody can do right now, but most people won't even think about it, right? Because they're too just depleted and bankrupt internally from the system that's sucking everybody dry. Anyways, let me wrap this one up here, and I'll continue on as for the journey series. And in terms of the regular video, I'm gonna end it here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.